Chapter 1401. Farm, mating farm, and the more secretive slaughterhouse were separated by a huge wall. The high wall was not a difficult obstacle for vampires, but for humans, it was an insurmountable gap. The people in the farm did not immediately know what happened on the other side of the high wall, and the same went for the other side. However, the inspectorate team, who was stationed in the high wall and monitoring the different farms, knew what happened on both sides immediately. Inside the high wall, in the office of the inspectorate team, who was facing the withdrawal of the inspectorate team, who had the title of Baron, was frowning. Managing the farm was a position with great wealth. For vampires, only a large number of ancient pure blood could be counted as real wealth. Obviously, the inspectorate team did not want to lose this position no matter what. Even if he was promoted to a superior noble, he did not want to leave the farm. It's just the death of a human housemaster, and they made such a big fuss about it. Could it be that the matter of me secretly selling pure blood has been discovered? The inspectorate team paced back and forth in his office. Even though the outside world was in an uproar because of the vampire killer, he did not pay much attention to it. The inspectorate team, who was worrying about his power, received an emergency notice from the mating farm on the other side of the high wall. His face instantly turned ugly. The notice said that the mating farm had been taken over by the human livestock, and almost half of the area had fallen. Moreover, the human livestock had a large number of weapons in their hands that could fight against vampires, even the most hated silver nitrate. The inspectorate team thought that he had heard it wrong, and that it was a joke played by some stupid subordinate. However, when he quickly walked to the direction of the mating farm, what he saw was a spreading fire. Different from the farm, which was a town, the mating farm was a complete factory structure. A large number of factories were engulfed by the fire. Amidst the chaos, vampires were constantly shot down from the sky. The inspector governor was drenched in cold sweat as he watched. He was already facing the crisis of being dismissed. If something were to happen to the mating farm at this moment, it would have already happened, and it would be a big deal. The inspectorate team felt that his position was completely gone. At this time, the inspectorate team angrily grabbed a monocular from his subordinate and directly scanned the mating farm below. A group of females and mutated humans, who should have been locked in various facilities to cultivate the next generation, were now brandishing weapons obtained from who knows where, forming a violent army. They actually suppressed the vampires, who were originally stronger, and forced them to retreat step by step. They even had to hide in a warehouse, not daring to come out. God knows where these females and breeders got these weapons that could cause such damage to vampires. The inspectorate team did not want to think about it at this time. What he thought was thinking was, this is simply a great humiliation. We were actually forced to hide by these domesticated animals. For thousands of years, the relationship between slavery and being enslaved had long been ingrained in the vampires' minds. But one day, these slaves had the power to resist. Governor, not good. They had breached another place. The production farm was breached. We don't have enough manpower. Request for backup. The inspectorate team's face became more and more ugly. There were actually not many vampires in the inspectorate team. Most of them were naturalized adult humans. But for the convenience of management, these naturalized adult humans were not given any power. Facing the weapons that could kill vampires, they were even more powerless to fight back. These guys can't get so many weapons for no reason. The inspectorate team muttered, there must be someone commanding these humans. We must find out as soon as possible. Also, go and inform the patrol team immediately and ask them to send some people over. In the end, the inspectorate team was like the militia, while the patrol team members were the elite troops of the clan. The inspectorate team side at this time. At this time, the dereliction of duty was already confirmed. The key was to see how much he could save to make up for his mistake. Why do they have to rebel? The inspectorate team coldly snorted. It's not good to be domesticated animals. Why do they have to seek death? Someone, bring me my armor. The subordinates quickly nodded and then quickly left. At this moment, the inspector general lowered his head and muttered to himself, as if he had made a decision. He hurriedly waved his hand to summon a messenger. Then, he quickly wrote down a message before having the messenger send it out. After a while, the subordinate sent the inspectorate team's armor over. At this time, the inspectorate team coldly said, "Pass down the order." Facing the resisting animals, except for those who were pregnant, it's not a problem to kill a few more males and females. Especially males. Anyway, there will be a batch of adults sent here soon. We have as many seeds as we want. Let these animals know the consequences of resistance. Yes, the development of the situation was completely beyond Anne's imagination. At this time, even delusion couldn't save her brain from being bombarded by the situation in front of her. Who the hell knew what had happened? And couldn't help but recall what she had done in this short period of time. At the beginning, after rescuing a batch of women from Amanda, she immediately went to attack the milk factory next to it. Because she had experienced it once, and the milk factory itself wasn't an important facility of the mating farm, the defense force was very weak. After easily killing the 2 vampires who were collecting milk, the original team of dozens of people instantly broke through to 3 digits. Then, like a snowball, it started rolling down from the top of the mountain. It didn't stop at all, and it was extremely fast. Milk factory, seed factory, pregnancy area, milk factory, and just mechanically took out batch after batch of weapons from the ring and handed them to the newly rescued humans. What made an even more puzzled was that the gems in the ring on her finger were crazily lighting up. 5 gems per kilogram were completely lit up. Even the 6th gem was lit up to blue, just a little bit more, and it would be the final purple gem. Although the merchant said that the more people she saved, the faster the ring would light up. But later, and found that it wasn't simply saving the people here that could truly light up the ring. She still needed to wake them up, let them regain hope, and let them take up weapons to fight back. The problem was, when she was in the first milk factory and remembered that she went through a lot of difficulties and even died once before she could wake the dozens of women up. But now, she didn't do anything at all. She really didn't do anything, except to hand out weapons to the newly rescued humans. Goddessin, just as Anne began to involuntarily let her imagination run wild, Amanda, who had changed into a military uniform, quickly walked over with a new batch of people in front of Anne. This time, it was a large group of pregnant women, and couldn't help but blink. They had already fought to the milk factory. She looked at the group of pregnant women in front of her in surprise. It seemed that Amanda wanted her to hand out weapons to these pregnant women. Speaking of Amanda, and really couldn't see through her. Ever since she left the milk factory, Amanda seemed to have been possessed. From the moment they captured the 2nd factory until now, Amanda had been the one in charge of almost everything. She couldn't help but wonder if the businessman had entrusted the task to the wrong person. Actually, it would have been better for Amanda to complete the task. She was really just a salted fish, and scratched her head and asked, "Amanda, did you say anything to them?" Amanda's whole body was pressed to the ground. "Goddessin, I've already told them your greatness. You've successfully sprinkled your brilliance into the darkness that swallowed them. From now on, they will be like me, and will treat Lady Goddess and as their own." "Yes, I see." Anne's neck was a little stiff as she nodded. She felt that what was happening in front of her was very similar to the content of a book she had read in the library before, something like a secret cult. She looked at the pregnant women with big bellies. God knew what Amanda had instilled in them before coming here. Although her gaze didn't feel as passionate as when Amanda looked at her, it still felt like it was burning, and couldn't help but cough lightly. She really couldn't let the pregnant women join the battle, so she slowly said, "Amanda, can you arrange people to protect them? They're not suitable for fighting." "I understand, Goddessin, Lady Goddessin," Amanda said seriously. "I've already made up my mind. This time, I'm just bringing them to see Goddessin. Let them feel your brilliance." "What brilliance do I have? The place behind me has been burned red by your fire." "Yes, I see," and still nodded. Then, who knew what to say? She didn't know what to say, so she simply cleared her throat and said, "Amanda, so far, we've saved many of our companions. What do you plan to do next?" Amanda raised her head and said directly, "We have Goddessin. We have weapons more powerful than these bloodthirsty vampires. So, I think that not only should we liberate the remaining areas in the deeper slaughterhouse, but we should also conquer the high wall." Conquering the high wall was equivalent to directly facing the vampires in the farm town. Those were the elites of the clans, and the soldiers of the inspection team couldn't compare to them at all, although the ring on her hand was magical, and didn't think that with this ring alone, she could overthrow the Tordo clan's 1,000-year rule. What after conquering the high wall? Liberate the farm, Amanda said seriously. Liberate the whole Tordo clan's companions. Finally, destroy the Tordo clan, and couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. She subconsciously said, "Amanda, do you really think you can defeat the Tordo clan?" Amanda's face was full of enthusiasm at this time. "Yes, because we have Goddessin. Under your brilliance, we're invincible. The fire behind me was really set by you guys. Or, after all the rings are lit up, I'll sneak away secretly. At this time, a man with a weapon, and didn't remember when she had armed this man. She couldn't even remember his name anyway. What a joke. She couldn't even count how many people she had saved. It had always been Amanda's plan. Not good. Not good. The man who rushed in was full of panic at this time. Amanda quickly stood up and shouted, "In front of the goddess, be quiet." The man's face was full of shame, and then he knelt on the ground, his body trembling slightly as he said, "Goddess, many of our companions were injured or died tragically. The governor of the inspection team personally took action. The weapons you gave us can't deal with it at all." And was shocked. As a person who was a candidate for a dormitory after naturalization, she had lived in the farm for a long time and naturally had seen the governor of the inspection team from afar several times. She more or less knew how terrifying this governor was. "I can't afford to offend him. I'll sneak away." Unexpectedly, Amanda snorted and said, "What are you afraid of? We have the goddess in here. It's just a governor. How dare you make a fuss about nothing? How arrogant is this guy?" And couldn't help but swallow quietly. She felt like crying but had no tears. She knew that she had a conscience. After dying once, she knew that her heart was cursed with cowardice. So when she killed the two vampires, she became tough. But it was impossible to be tough all the time. After all, creatures like humans were the most courageous when they were hot-headed. Once they calmed down, they would become timid. Amanda, I think, and thought about it, and felt that she had to correct Amanda's fanaticism. "Goddess!" Unexpectedly, Amanda suddenly shouted, scaring in so much that she almost jumped up. What is it?" Amanda knelt down on one knee and said, "Goddessin, I request to fight the governor of the inspection team. Goddess, please give me the invincible holy light." It's over, even if Amanda didn't mention it, and could more or less guess what kind of character setting this guy used to grow up. "Goddess, please give me the light of victory." Amanda shouted again at this time. That's why I'm saying that the flames behind me are really just the flames that you guys created by setting fires everywhere. Unexpectedly, the ring on her finger shone brightly and then went into Amanda's body. Bathed in this radiance, Amanda's essence, energy, and spirit seemed to have been raised by several levels. This light didn't fade for a long time and didn't seem to want to fade away. What's going on?" And couldn't help but look at the ring on her finger in shock. The sixth gem's brightness directly reverted to its original gray color. But immediately, the gray began to light up again and turn back to red. Chapter 1402. Unlike most of the seductive bitches in the Toridu clan who pursued beauty, the governor of the inspection unit had a rough appearance. Even the weapon it used was a spiked mace with spikes hanging all over it. After putting on the armor, the governor general, who was already quite muscular, suddenly turned into an iron tower. Facing the humans who were holding silver nitrate weapons that could kill vampires, the governor general swung his spiked club as if he was in a place where no one could stop him. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Facing this undefeatable and terrifying guy, the descendants of the ancients who had just been liberated from their hellish life suddenly became fearful. Could this kind of resistance really resist the fate of being enslaved? The courage that they had just awakened suddenly became ridiculously weak. In just a moment, the originally imposing formation was suddenly broken by the governor. Just a bunch of cowards, just a bunch of cowards. Raising the mace in his hand, the governor's voice spread all around. We are your masters. Remember, this is the result of your resistance. The mace picked up a woman who couldn't move due to fear, raised high, and then slammed hard on the ground. This woman was about to be smashed into meat paste. At this moment, a figure bathed in light quickly rushed over and caught the woman firmly. Amanda, who had volunteered to fight, had arrived. Feeling that Amanda's aura was completely different from the rest of the resistance, the governor of the inspection unit frowned slightly and sneered. You're the one who hid behind and commanded these animals to resist, right? Amanda ignored the governor's question and put the woman down. Then she patted the woman's shoulder and said seriously, "Thank you for your hard work. The goddess has seen your bravery. Don't be afraid. And there's no need to be afraid because the goddess has always been with us." Amanda's words seemed to have some kind of incredible power. The woman who was trembling in fear immediately calmed down, and her eyes gradually became firm again. Go back to your companions first. I know. After that, Amanda looked directly at the governor who was behind the high wall without fear. To all the humans in the farm, perhaps the fear that this governor brought to them was even greater than those high and mighty vampire nobles. Because this guy in front of him had been ruling over all the farms in the clan all this while. But there was no need to be afraid. Avatar slowly exhaled. He raised the gun in his hand and pointed it at the governor. He calmly said, "Today I will kill you." Although he did not know why the woman was glowing, the governor did not sense any danger from her at all. The governor general spread his huge bat wings and instantly appeared in front of Avatar. He swung his mace down so quickly that Avatar could only raise his hands to block the attack. The sharp spikes on the mace pierced into Amanda's arm. At the same time, the heavy blow caused her knees to bend, and she fell to her knees. I thought there was something special about it. The governor laughed coldly. So that's all you have. At this moment, all the gazes on the battlefield were focused on Amanda. The people who had escaped all raised their voices and seemed to be beginning to become unstable again. In the distance, and who was surrounded by a group of people who were holding all kinds of weapons to protect her, saw this scene, and her heart almost jumped out of her chest. She gritted her teeth and was about to do something when suddenly, a powerful and dazzling light burst out from Amanda again. The brightness of the 6th gem on the ring instantly dropped to 0. Even the brightness of the 5th gem turned back to gray. Then, the brightness of the 4th gem dropped to 0. The 3rd one, when it was almost gray in color, it finally stopped, and did not have time to feel sorry for this, because at this time, Amanda had actually raised the governor's mace. She actually had the upper hand in the fight with the governor. How is this possible? The governor was shocked. He only felt that this woman who could easily smash to death suddenly seemed to have some kind of divine power. At this moment, Avatar let out a low roar and grabbed the mace with both hands. She actually snatched the mace from the governor's hands. Avatar, who had snatched the mace, took advantage of the governor's moment of shock to use the mace that was even bigger than her as a weapon and viciously smashed it towards the governor. Clang, clang! The sound of metal colliding with metal was so loud that it hurt the eardrums. At the same time, it also made the governor see stars. However, Avatar was becoming more and more powerful, as if she did not know fatigue. She swung the huge mace faster and faster, and her blows became more and more vicious. At this time, the governor did not have any strength to resist at all. This mace was made of a special metal. Putting aside its weight, just its hardness alone had already surpassed the armor on his body. At this moment, the armor was being smashed by the mace. The governor's limbs were even being twisted because of the armor's deformation. However, Avatar did not have any intention of stopping. Finally, under the gaze of the many vampires from the inspection team, The governor in the high wall let out the first painful howl. The powerful governor was being beaten by a human to the point that he could only howl in pain. This scene made the few vampires in the inspection team stunned. Clang! Another terrifying blow. After the blow, the mason avatar's hand was directly broken. At the same time, the governor's limbs and even his body were severely twisted. He fell to the ground and blood splattered everywhere, almost dyeing half of Avatar's clothes red. However, thanks to the vampire's strong vitality, the heavily injured governor did not die. His eyes were still moving, as if he was looking for a chance to counterattack. However, Avatar slowly took out her gun and pointed it at the governor's heart. This is the final punishment. The bullet roared out and the ground trembled slightly. After the violent explosion, a deformed helmet soared high into the sky and then fell. The helmet rolled on the ground until it reached the feet of a stiff vampire. At the center of everyone's attention, a figure slowly walked out of the fire. Avatar. At this moment, not only was there no injury on her body, but the radiance on her body was even stronger. Her hand was still holding the governor's head. Avatar casually threw the governor's head on the ground and shot out the gun again. This time, the power of the gun was much weaker, but it directly blew up the head. After doing all this, Avatar once again raised the gun in his hand and pointed it at one of the vampires in the air. Now, I will punish you. Bang! The gun shot out a terrifying red light, instantly engulfing the vampire and burning it. In the blink of an eye, the vampire's body was charred black and fell to the ground from a high place. After falling to the ground, it twitched and howled crazily. It seemed that it would not survive. After the deathly silence, there were wild cheers, the cheers of all the resisting ancients. The goddess will guide us to victory. At this moment, Avatar seemed to have exhausted all her strength and sang loudly, "The goddess will guide us to victory." It was as if she was born to be able to infect others. Or perhaps it was because of the light on her body. People began to follow Avatar and shouted the name of the goddess. "Retreat, retreat to that side. The governor has been killed. This group of humans has the power to threaten us." Facing the horrifying aura of the ancients, a vampire in the inspection team, whose authority was second only to the governor, frowned and said, "Let this group of humans celebrate here first. They will never know the power of the superior nobles." One by one, the vampires began to fly back to the high wall and evacuated from the mating farm. The naturalized ancients in the inspection team, who couldn't fly, were now surrounded and had no chance to resist at all. At this moment, because of the retreat of the vampires, the morale of the ancients' descendants was pushed to the peak. They a group of enslaved, oppressed, and even treated like livestock not long ago. But now these superior vampires were defeated. Wild cheers and howls filled the surroundings and also filled the area around. And went and saw her kind looking at her and felt the fanatical gaze in their eyes that was more and more similar to Avatar's. She couldn't help but feel a little guilty. But accompanied by the cheers of the crowd, the ring on Anne's finger, the ring that originally had a few gems extinguished because of Avatar, instantly lit up again at this moment. Not only that, the remaining gems on the ring also completely lit up at this moment, turning into purple. All of them lit up and looked at the ring on her finger in disbelief. At this moment, the ring seemed to be pulled by some kind of force and slowly fell off from Anne's finger. She was instantly shocked and reached out to grab it, but the ring suddenly flew out and then slowly fell somewhere into the palm of a hand. And looked up and couldn't help but be startled. That mysterious merchant silently appeared in front of her and subconsciously looked around her. Her kind who were rescued were still cheering for their victory, as if they didn't notice her actions at all, or even the appearance of this traveling merchant. "We meet again, miss, and the speed at which you completed the task was much faster than I expected." Boss Luo smiled at the ring in his hand. "Even because I completed the task ahead of time, I had to temporarily leave and come over, of course. I was also happy to do so. After all, Missin, you are really outstanding." and quickly shook her head and hurriedly asked, I'm not interested in listening to your praises. You said that as long as I light up all the gems on this ring, you can send me out of here and let me live a new life. Now that all the gems are lit up, you won't go back on your words, right? She was really afraid that this merchant would go back on his words. She deeply experienced the magic of this ring. Then, the merchant who gave her this ring would probably be even more bizarre than this ring, right? She had an instinctive fear of him from the bottom of her heart. She anxiously waited for his reply. Of course. Boss Luo directly nodded and said rather casually, I said that as long as you complete the task, I will send you out as a reward. And are you really going to go back on your words? And suddenly became a little nervous and directly screamed. Boss Luo shook his head and motioned her not to be too agitated. I just want to say that the capacity of this ring is still too small after all. It's a little bit of a pity. After all, there are still many people here who haven't been rescued. I'm done. And directly said, you can find someone else for this kind of thing. Amanda can do it. I'll recommend her to you. She's born to do this kind of thing. Boss Luo indifferently said, the Amanda you mentioned, are you referring to this lady? He pointed forward, pointing at the woman in the crowd, who was now clasping her hands together and kneeling on the ground devoutly in the midst of everyone's joy. She was crying out of joy and praising the name of the goddess because she was touched. Every word she said couldn't be separated from, and her every syllable seemed to be spoken for Anne's ears, even without the ring in her hand, and subconsciously felt as if there was a wave of warmth flowing into her heart. Suddenly, an indescribable feeling began to clog up Anne's heart, making her feel rather uncomfortable. I already said that I'm not a goddess. Why doesn't this fellow listen to me? And couldn't help but murmur softly, looking at Amanda's devoutness. Yeah, why doesn't she listen to me? Boss Luo said softly, and suddenly quivered when she looked at Luochio again. Her gaze was somewhat complicated as she asked, If I leave, Amanda, the people here, what will happen to them? Boss Luo made a thoughtful expression and slowly said, basically, all of this is based on the ability of the ring. Now, Miss Anne has completed the task, and I'll also take back this ring. I think, after I send you away and leave this place, they will probably return to their original state soon. After all, there are still many vampires. Once again, back to that kind of hell, and couldn't help but become silent. Boss Luo smiled and waved his hand. In the crowd, a light door appeared silently. This light door opened in the middle of the crowd. People were still cheering, hugging each other, shedding tears, and singing the name of the goddess. Miss Anne can go to a safe place after leaving here. Luochio's voice had some kind of magic. As a reward, I'll give you a completely happy life. You'll enjoy the rest of your life as a rich person in a world completely dominated by humans. He stepped aside in front of the door and made an inviting gesture, just like a hotel's gatekeeper welcoming a guest, and didn't hesitate to step forward, step by step, towards the light door in the crowd. She knew that all the people here couldn't see at this moment. Because they couldn't see, they didn't know that the goddess they were singing about was about to abandon them at this moment. They were just like idiots, and stood in front of the light door. One of her feet even stepped into the light door. At this moment, a figure walked past the light door, naturally passing by in front of her eyes. Amanda! Anne's footsteps suddenly froze. Amanda seemed to be looking for something, looking around in panic. Her eyes kept shuttling back and forth in the crowd. She whispered something in a low voice, and couldn't hear it, but she felt that she was calling her own name, and grabbed her hair, directly squatted down, scratching her head in annoyance. After a while, she stopped this very indecent action and stood up again, retreating from the light door. Miss, and don't you want to go in? Or do you have doubts about what I said? Luochio asked in a low voice behind her, and raised her head, took a deep breath, and then a long sigh, muttering to herself, I'm just like an idiot. After that, and directly turned around, hey, this ring, can you lend it to me for a while? Although I don't know why you want to light up the gem on the ring. This thing should be able to be taken away, right? If this is what you want, then I'll fill it up for you again. The price is that you lend it to me for a while. How about it? What an irresistible suggestion. Boss Luo smiled, but turned his hand, making the ring in his palm disappear in front of Anne's eyes. Anne's pupils contracted, but soon, another ring suddenly appeared in the air, and then slowly landed in front of, and Boss Luo's voice sounded slowly. Since Miss Anne has such an idea, then please use this ring. It has a bigger capacity. The design of the ring was similar to the previous one, but the difference was that there were not 10 small gems on it, but a whole one. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but when she stared at this big gem, she felt that she seemed to see a palace-like building inside. It seemed that there was a big world inside. Of course it was an illusion, and rubbed between her eyebrows. How could this be possible? If there was a world inside, her fingers would be crushed. Moreover, now was not the time to let her imagination run wild, because she appeared in front of everyone again. At this moment, Amanda was walking towards her quickly. The trace of fear on her face had disappeared and was replaced by an angelic smile. Goddess, I'm just like an idiot. I'm just like an idiot, and laughed at herself, and then slowly put on the ring. Chapter 1403. In the palace, the nobles were discussing how to eat the food in front of them. The girl who was about to be eaten was frozen by a special method on her 18th birthday. When the freezer was opened, the naked girl appeared in front of the nobles in the cold air. The girl's body was covered with a thin layer of frost after being frozen for a long time. Even her hair and eyebrows were dyed with a layer of white. It was like a crystal. I'm about to defrost. The vampire who presented the girl to the nobles proudly picked up a dagger and grabbed the girl's arm. The vampire noble's action was quite gentle, as if he was holding the wrist of a dance partner. Then, he gently slit the girl's wrist with the dagger. Because the frozen blood was quite viscous, there was no splatter. The blood just seeped out of the girl's wrist little by little. He lifted the girl's wrist and kissed it gently. After sucking for a moment, he looked up at the nobles who couldn't restrain their instincts and showed their fangs. He smiled and said, "My family, why are you still waiting?" They began to surround the girl, who seemed to be asleep, clustered around her. They began to smear each other's lips with blood as if they were enjoying bliss. "Marquis Gouda, aren't you coming?" Marquis Gouda sat quietly at the side and just smiled at their invitation. Then he slowly stood up. As a prestigious vampire among the nobles, he shouldn't be unsociable. He was elegant and calm, but he didn't join in the fun at first. He just walked over slowly. "Come, my Marquis, this is the best seat specially prepared for you." The forthright noble who initiated the banquet used a dagger to gently slit the girl's neck. The blood seeped out of the carotid artery faster than other places. Perhaps it really had good intentions. Marquis Gouda smiled and nodded. At this moment, an untimely sound broke the noble's joy. It was the sound of the door being opened rudely. Due to the excessive force, the door slammed into the walls on both sides, and the one who appeared in front of the door was a vampire wearing a patrol uniform. When Marquis Gouda saw this, his eyes lit up slightly, and a wisp of a mysterious smile appeared on the corners of his mouth because of this. The nobles were unable to call out the vampire's name for the time being, but most of the nobles were dissatisfied with the interruption of their feast. But they soon remembered something. Before they ate, they were actually discussing whether they should awaken the Grand Duke of the clan in advance. And the reason why the Grand Duke was awakened was because Bazabi had disregarded the objections of the nobles and forcefully prohibited them from eating normally. The instigator of this banquet immediately became angry. Facing the motionless guard standing in front of the door, he angrily rebuked, "I think you need to give all of us nobles a reasonable explanation. Really, you should understand that even if your immediate superior, Busby, holds the authority of the clan, our status is still much nobler than yours." "Sir," but in the face of the nobles yelling, the patrolling vampires in front of the door did not react at all. They still stood there motionless. "Listen, I had kept this food in cold storage before, so it wasn't included in Busby's new rules. Now, get out of here right now." The infuriated noble snorted coldly. In the afternoon, Bobo was the happiest because he was dissatisfied with Busby's new rules and was beheaded in the end. He didn't feel too much, so he didn't take Marquis Gouda's proposal to heart. But now a small, low-level noble dared to be so arrogant in front of him. The instigator of the banquet, who felt that his authority and identity as a superior noble had been completely insulted, was already thinking about whether he could agree with Marquis Gouda's proposal. Anyway, after awakening the Grand Duke, Marquis Gouda would bear the consequences. Finally, the vampire in front of the door reacted. He suddenly took a step forward and then fell directly to the ground. This scene caused all the nobles in the room to reveal astonished expressions. Marquis Gouda even frowned, and a trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. And the doubt in his eyes immediately turned into shock. Whoa! A black flame suddenly appeared behind the vampire, who fell to the ground at this time, and then swallowed the vampire at a terrifying speed. In just a few breaths, the patrolling guard was directly burned to ashes. Nothing was left. What happened? The nobles were startled and then looked at each other. Who did this? They asked each other doubtfully. They thought that a noble secretly killed the vampire because he didn't like it. But who would use this black flame? There didn't seem to be such a guy among the superior nobles of the clans. Just as the nobles were puzzled, a figure slowly appeared in front of the door. She was wearing a black robe, and her cheeks were split in two. One side was the appearance of an exquisite classical beauty, while the other side was burning with a black flame. Her appearance was extremely strange. Where are the guards? A noble frowned. Guards? But there was no response. At this moment, the black-robed woman looked around. When her gaze landed on the ice chest and saw the girl who was frozen and had cuts on her body, her gaze became cold and sharp. Why is there such a dirty creature in the world? The black-robed woman's voice was like a knife. This must be a mistake made by the Creator. So he created you. How dare you? The black-robed woman suddenly waved her hand, and a vigorous black flame suddenly appeared in her palm, and then splashed out like a bonfire that was kicked away. The nobles in the room didn't know what this black flame was. They even directly reached out to slap it without caring. Of course, there were also some who rolled up their cloaks, intending to sweep the black flame away. Unexpectedly, this black flame was extremely strange. It would ignite when touched and couldn't be extinguished at all, except for some nobles who directly dodged. The nobles who touched the black flame all had black flames on their bodies. They were burned by the black flame at a terrifying speed. They fell to the ground and rolled in pain. Painful screams filled the whole room, and the black-robed woman slowly walked into the room amidst the miserable screams. As the black flame burned, she also harvested the lives of the nobles. The black flame was replenished by a large amount at this time, and it was as if it was a substance and actually flowed around her. A vampire nobleman who was lucky enough to escape the attack appeared behind the black-robed woman in a flash and pounced on her back. However, the flowing flames around the black-robed woman seemed to have a mind of their own. When the nobleman was about to approach, the black flames directly transformed into a huge palm, and with an even faster speed, it directly grasped the nobleman tightly. The nobleman who launched the sneak attack, at this time, screamed more miserably than the wailing nobles present. His body even directly vaporized in an instant. As the nobles were burned to ashes by the black flame one by one, the remaining nobles were instantly terrified. They were already in a high position and had wantonly enjoyed hundreds of years and had long forgotten how to fight. Even when they fought with the werewolf for generations, they only discussed, laughed, and enjoyed in the safety of the castle. They still had great power, but they had forgotten how to use it. No one would resist them. In the territory of the clan, except for the Grand Duke, they were the highest group. Even the acting Grand Duke couldn't neglect them. Guards! A nobleman rushed out of the door in horror at this time. But the moment he was about to rush out of the door, the black flame burned from the floor and instantly sealed the door completely. Facing the strange and terrifying flame, the nobleman who intended to escape had to stop his body in horror. Bang, bang, bang. At the same time, the black flame from the black-robed woman began to burn everything in the room. The flame turned the room into a purgatory. In the crazy burning, the nobles died one after another. Marquis Gouda quietly retreated with cold sweat. He already knew who the black-robed woman who suddenly broken was. The vampire killer. The guard sent by Busby had already informed him of this news, but he concealed this news and didn't tell all the nobles here, because it felt that this vampire killer was just exaggerating. It might even be some trick of Busby's. He was keen on politics, and had always been unwilling to submit to Balegan. Now that Balegan left without permission and even transferred the clan's authority to Busby, who wasn't even a noble, he saw a wonderful opportunity to attack Balegan. But assassins really do exist, and it was so terrifying. Although these upper-level nobles were all rotten and had forgotten their fighting instincts, they were still incomparable to the lower-level nobles. Marquis Gouda forced himself to calm down. He analyzed the situation in front of him and made a final judgment. He shouldn't confront this mysterious killer head-on. He found an opportunity to observe the flow of the flame, then suddenly spread his wings and crashed into the ceiling, intending to break through the palace and escape. He succeeded. In an instant, he broke through the ceiling and came to the upper level of the palace. Marquis Gouda looked back at the black flame below and couldn't help but feel lucky. But in the next second, its rejoicing instantly turned into fear, because an arm made of black flames stretched out at this moment and directly grabbed his body, fiercely dragging him back and forth in the sea of black flame. Before dying, Marquis Gouda only had one extremely regretful thought. He shouldn't have secretly removed most of the guards in the palace, and even let his confidants pretend to be Busby's men in order to stimulate the other nobles so that they would agree to awaken the clan's Grand Duke. Even the confidants who pretended to be Busby's men were directly eliminated by the vampire killer before they could even start the plan. But he wasn't willing to die like this. In the pain of being burned by the black flame, Marquis Gouda suddenly stretched out his hand and directly pulled out his heart. Then he used his last bit of strength to throw out the heart. Boom! Finally, the black flame filled the entire room and finally exploded, destroying the entire luxurious room. Half of the outer wall of the palace directly collapsed at this moment. Marquis Gouda's heart, at this moment, was successfully thrown into the grass in the front yard of the palace before the black flame touched it. The heart was still beating. All of a sudden, someone picked up the heart. The heart was beating strongly in a fair hand. Although the physical body was dead, the soul of the Marquis was still there. His spiritual will was preserved by the heart. But this preservation didn't last long. "It's you." Marquis Gouda's voice came from the beating heart. The Marquis found that the one who picked up his heart was Balegan's confidant that he wanted to eliminate, Busby. But at this time, it was naturally not the time to show his hostility to Busby. The Marquis hurriedly said, "Oh, that's great, my dear Busby. I didn't expect it to be you. Quick, send me to the blood pool. I need blood to be reborn." Holding Marquis Gouda's heart, Busby indifferently sized it up. He came to track the vampire killer, but seemed to be one step slower. "Busby, why are you still in a daze? Quickly send me to the blood pool. I need blood for my body to be reborn." Marquis Gouda's voice became anxious again. "I will remember this favor of yours. Believe me, I will give you a reward that you can't imagine. It seems that you didn't do your duty well. You only have yourself to blame," Busby said coldly. At the same time, he sized up the gradually extinguishing black flame in the palace in front of him. At the same time, Busby's palm began to slowly squeeze the Marquis's heart. "What do you want to do? Busby, how dare you?" The Marquis was not angry for too long, because Busby had directly crushed the heart at this time. So, the Marquis was only left with a shrill scream in the end. Its voice even faded away very quickly. The crushed heart began to overflow with some thick, dark golden blood. Busby was expressionless. He just raised his head and raised the heart high above his mouth. He began to swallow the blood that was squeezed out of the heart. The amount of dark golden blood was not much, at most a dozen drops. After swallowing the blood, Busby directly threw the Marquis's heart on the ground. The heart instantly withered and finally melted into a puddle of black mud-like matter. This meant that not only could Marquis Gouda not be reborn, but he would also disappear forever. Busby reached out and wiped his lips, slowly exhaling a breath, and said in a low voice, "Superior nobles are indeed the best tonics raised by the Grand Duke. No wonder Beyligan raised you so generously." As he said, Busby looked up and saw a figure slowly descending under the support of the black flame. "Traitor, we meet again." The woman in the black robe, Meow, looked at Busby, and her gaze suddenly became sharper. Busby was silent for a while before slowly saying, "Know me?" Chapter 1404. It was not the first time Busby heard the word traitor from her mouth. But Busby did not attack this vampire killer immediately. What he swallowed was the essence of Marquis Gouda's life, the power of the highest-ranking vampire in the clan. Even if he could adapt to the high concentration of the noble's blood essence, his body would need some time to adapt to it. Of course, this time would not be too long. "It seems like you have been calling me a traitor all this time," Busby said indifferently. "But in fact, I don't even have the slightest impression of who you are. So what is your basis? Have you forgotten so quickly?" Mekong could not help but sneer. "It has only been 10 years since we last met, and you have already forgotten me, Busby." Busby, that was indeed his name. But Busby was not too surprised that she could call out his name. As the superior of the patrol guards, his name was not a secret. Just a little bit of asking, and even without asking, she would know his name. "Sorry, I don't know what you were talking about. 10 years ago, looking at the situation, this woman should have discovered the truth after she became an adult 10 years ago, so she started to hold a grudge against vampires. But 10 years ago, he was already a vampire. Even earlier than that, he was from that place, that abyss. How could he have anything to do with her? What's wrong? Have you completely forgotten your past after becoming a vampire?" Mekong walked closer step by step. The black flame on her cheeks kept burning and swaying. "Then, let me give you a good reminder." He silently estimated the degree of adaptation of his body to Marquis Gouda's blood essence and did not move. Mekong's voice was like the sound of glass being scraped. It was very harsh. "Your name is Busby. Your character is noble young master. But because this persona is too ordinary, you have never been named by the nobles. Instead, your sister, sickly beauty, Mina, has been loved by many nobles since she was 12 years old. Your sister has never stopped being named." Busby just looked at her indifferently. He did not respond to her words. Mina's character was not sickly beauty at all. Mina was. Later, Mina died before she became an adult because she was named too many times and she was born very weak. In the end, she could not withstand the crazy demands of the nobles. Just a month before her 18th birthday, Mina, who was named for the last time, was directly sucked dry of all her blood by a noble who could not control himself. Busby was still expressionless, but suddenly something in his memory, something blurred, as if it was just a fleeting shadow, it could not be touched. Later, when you saw your sister's corpse, you were too agitated that night and got into a conflict with the inspectors. You were thrown into the water dungeon and were only released a month later. Cockroaches, maggots, rats, a foul stench, and the sound of chains clanging against each other. Roar, hatred, despair. Something flashed in Busby's mind again. Mekong was still approaching. Her voice was getting closer at the same time. When you appeared in front of us again, the hatred in your eyes was frightening. But you were like a flag, giving us, those who directly collapsed after knowing the truth, the motivation to continue moving forward. You said you wanted revenge. You said you wanted to take back the things that were taken away by the vampires. You said no matter how long it took, no matter how much pain you had to endure, you would never give up. More and more things flashed in his mind. Busby subconsciously shook his head slightly. Facing Mekong's approach for the first time, he took a small step back. But this step did not shorten the distance between them. She finally came in front of Busby, reached out her hand and gently stroked his cheek. She looked up and said, "All of us trusted you so much. Even though we were tortured in the mating farm, we had the courage to live because of you. Because every time we were desperate, you would always stand up and challenge the vampire's authority again and again. You were exposed to the sun by the vampires in the square again and again. You were put down again and again with half of your life left. You were treated like a toy by the vampires time and time again." Busby suddenly took a deep breath, and the bat wings on his back instantly spread out. At this moment, Mekong's voice suddenly became cold. "But why? Why did you give in to them in the end? Why did you become the thing you hated the most in the end? Why did you betray us?" Whoosh! Busby! Traitor! Accompanied by Mekong's sharp cry, a black flame soared into the sky. After swallowing many vampire guards and nobles, the power of the black flame seemed to have reached a terrifying level. A giant made of black flame floated slowly behind Mekong. It looked like a giant made of fire. In the air, Busby looked at the giant made of black flame in shock. It swallowed Mekong directly, or in other words, protected her in its body. The black flame had no heat, but could burn almost everything. He had experienced it once before, but he didn't expect the power of the black flame seemed to be even more terrifying this time. Traitor. A traitor who is willing to be their lackey. Mekong's voice changed. At this moment, Mekong was like a machine that had lost control. Accompanied by her angry roar, the black flame giant instantly roared to the sky. Bam, 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 bam. Along with the giant's angry roar, black flame bullets shot out from its body, indiscriminately shooting in all directions. The terrifying burning power of the black flame instantly burned everything it touched into ashes. This thing couldn't be touched by the body. Busby kept dodging the flame bullets, thinking about how to deal with this extremely troublesome killer. Master Busby. The movement instantly alerted the patrolling guards in the town. The black flame giant that was almost 20 meters tall was so conspicuous in this small town of the farm. "Don't come over," Busby shouted coldly. "Everyone, listen to my order. Don't come near here. Then evacuate all the crops as fast as you can. You must ensure the safety of the crops as soon as possible." "Yes, master." After giving the order, Busby took a deep breath and glanced at the office building. If this killer's target was only him, if you really like me like this, then use all of your abilities to kill me. He looked at Mekong, who was covered in flames, and said in a deep voice, "Let me see how strong your so-called hatred is." He planned to lure the vampire killer away from the town so that he could minimize the damage to the farm. His provocation seemed to have succeeded in provoking the enraged meow meow that seemed to have gone out of control. At this moment, the black flame giant twisted its body and followed Mekong as it chased after Busby's step. As the saying goes, peeping for a while is fun, peeping for a while is fun, peeping for a while is fun. This saying could be applied to the current Kelowna Shinryu. Ever since the size issue was agreed upon, the true dragon of the Divine Prefecture had temporarily thrown the matter of that cheap disciple, the Radiance Tower Master, to the back of his mind. He began to send even more sharp questions to this intelligence channel. He couldn't stop even if he wanted to. It was like a primary school student hiding under his blanket in the middle of the night and secretly pushing Goldie YouTube without telling his parents. He thought that as long as he finished reading this chapter, he would immediately go to sleep. However, as soon as he finished reading one chapter, he would immediately start reading one chapter after another, unable to stop at all. Finally, after the routine questions were basically satisfied, the true dragon of China suddenly swallowed her saliva. She sneakily looked around her again. After confirming that there was still no one around, she added another dozens of layers of enchantments on top of the original dozens of layers of enchantments as psychological comfort. Only then did she dare to ask more boldly with a strong breath. Have you done it before? These two, I mean your boss and that person." She got the answer. The true dragon of the godly land held her breath all of a sudden and raised her voice. But after a while, the answer to this question could not be poured into her head. What was going on? Just when the Kelowna Shinryu was about to lose her patience, a message that almost made her explode was slowly transmitted into her mind. After the message was translated, it was something like this frowny-faced "Dear VIP user, since your information fee has reached the limit of the sign bill, please continue to use our information channel after this fee is paid. Luochio, F*CKU. You'd better. Rumble. The whole villa shook slightly. Long Shiruo was startled. She frowned and waved her hand to disperse the hundreds of barriers. Then, she hurriedly pulled open the curtains and looked outside. From here, she could see the situation in the farm. But at this moment, what appeared in front of her was a sea of black fire. Burning. The whole farm was burning. In this sea of black fire, she could vaguely see a flame giant moving in the sea of fire. The flame giant kept waving its hands as if it was waving something. Long Shaw frowned. The black flame in front of her gave her a very familiar feeling. It's not the scheming maids. What's going on? The Kelowna Shinryu frowned and went out from the window. Then, she quickly circled around the villa. Finally, she met the maid who was also looking at the scene on the balcony. The Shinryu and the maid's eyes met directly. The atmosphere became tense instantly. The moths outside, are they your doing again? After a moment of silence, Long Shua asked in a low voice. At the same time, she looked around and said, "Where's your boss?" "Miss Long seems to care about my master very much." The maid smiled and said, "If there's anything, I can convey it to him. But he's not here now. Even if there's something, he won't tell you. He's not here." The Kelowna Shinryu frowned and pointed at the flame that destroyed everything in the town. "What's wrong with this thing? I can smell your scent from it." The maid said indifferently, "Before answering Miss Long's question, I hope Miss Long can answer my question first." Longshaw said unhappily, "What's the question?" Yu Yi said, "Is the inhuman territory also under Miss Long's protection?" "Of course not." The Kelowna Shinryu snorted and said unhappily, "You mean this has nothing to do with me and I shouldn't interfere, isn't it?" The maid smiled and said, "Or Miss Long, because my master, what about me? Make it clear." The Kelowna Shinryu panicked and looked around. Miss Servant Girl chuckled. "I mean, Miss Long, are you taking advantage of my master's interest in you? So you want to do something to influence my master in turn, right?" "Oh." Long Shruo was never afraid of anyone. "If I can influence your master, it's because of my ability, right? On the other hand, if you can't correct your master, doesn't that mean you're a failure?" The maid and the Shinryu looked at each other again. After a while, the maid said indifferently, "Miss Long, you know, if there's a good reason, even without my master's permission, I can do it." Long Shruo also wanted to know the depth of this scheming maid. She raised her eyebrows and sneered. "Do you want to fight? To be honest, I don't like you for a long time." At this moment, Yi slowly floated up. She spread her hands slightly, and black flames condensed into roses, blooming around her. "Don't worry, this is not Kelowna, so I'll take good care of you, after all." Yu Yi chuckled. "Anyway, Miss Long is a rare VIP. If I offend you, my master will blame me. So annoying. You call me master every time you open your mouth. Without this master, you'll die. I'd like to see if your master will feel heartache if I hurt you." The Kelowna Shinryu sneered. She could be cowardly in front of anything, except this scheming woman, because this was a battle between women. On the phone, Xian 81 Chinese. Chapter 1405. Once a woman decided to take action, she wouldn't stop until she calmed down, no matter if it was a queen in a high position or a harmless girl next door. It seemed that they were born with a trait that was more stubborn than men. And even if they did take action, most of them wouldn't admit that they were impulsive. Instead, they would try their best to find a reason for their behavior, and they would succeed in finding numerous reasons. What's wrong with wanting to hit this scheming woman? Can't a woman be stubborn for once? That's probably the reason. Long Shua. Why would she have such an unwise idea and even take action to carry out such an idea? It's really puzzling. But it's not bad to take action. It's a strange feeling of satisfaction. That's probably the reason Miss made. No matter what the reason was, The beautiful rose wall maze of the villa had turned into ashes the moment they started fighting. Facing the scheming maid from the mysterious shop, Kelowna Shinryu, who didn't know her background, didn't intend to test her from the beginning. Instead, she launched an attack under the limit of the inhuman realm. Miss Maid also didn't intend to destroy the inhuman realm because of such an attack. She just adjusted her power to the limit of the inhuman realm. Whether it was Shinryu from Kelowna or the maid from the club, they could easily adjust their power levels to this extent. But when both of them adjusted their power levels to the same level, it would take a long time to determine the winner. Their battle was outside the farm, separated by a small hill. That's right, it was in the woods where Kelowna Shinryu beat up the golden dragon in the evening. Bang! They had never seen such a Miss Maid before. She didn't even use any elegant fighting skills. She simply jumped and punched. Her black and white maid dress fluttered in the night sky, like a fairy in the night. Her body was still beautiful, but her punches caused the ground to collapse, crack, and then scatter. It was just a punch on the ground, but it directly caused the whole woods to collapse. Countless fireflies scattered rapidly in the disaster, trying to escape from this unexpected disaster. But apparently, this was not the only destructive force. The power of the true dragon of the divine land, at least at this moment, was no less than the true dragon's power. Why did you suddenly reappear in Kelowna after disappearing for 100 years? Not giving in to each other, there were also very sharp questions. I'm just a maid. The shop was moved by the owner's wish. I can't answer you, Mississippi Long. Maybe you can try the information channel that Master gave you. Bang, bang. During the brief exchange, Kelowna Shinryu and Miss Maid had attacked each other for more than 10 rounds. This was almost the highest standard battle in the modern world. Even if both of them tacitly limited their power to the limit of the inhuman realm, the battle still shook the inhuman realm. This kind of shaking wasn't local. The instability of the space caused a complicated chain reaction, like the ocean currents flowing to the other side of the ocean. It was hard to estimate the influence of this kind of influence on different regions and different races in the inhuman realm. But no matter what kind of influence it would have in the future, Kelowna Shinryu and the club maid obviously didn't intend to stop fighting. Why did the previous owner transfer the shop to the current owner? Why did you destroy his original life? Miss Long, could it be that you already know my current master before this? Don't you think it's too one-sided to destroy? One-sided? Why can't this kind of one-sided story be just your side of the story? In the end, you're just loyal to the shop. For you, it doesn't matter whether the owner changes or not, right? Kelowna Shinryu's cold tone suddenly reached a new height. Humph, you seem to be loyal to your current owner. But if one day the owner changes again, will you still fight with him like this? I guess you'll forget about him very soon, just like how you treat your previous owner now. Mississippi Maid suddenly stopped and lowered her head. Kelowna Shinryu didn't know what Maid was going to do next, so she hurriedly stopped herself. This should be a great opportunity, but Longshaw had suffered a lot in the hands of this scheming maid, so she instinctively became cautious. At the same time, she suddenly felt a kind of joy of gaining the upper hand. She actually gained the upper hand in this battle of words. What? Did I hit the nail on the head? Kelowna Shinryu, who got a certain kind of pleasure, suddenly couldn't stop and continued to say, "What's the saying again? A shop owner with flowing water, a maid made of iron. It's talking about you, right? Tut tut, you're always like this. You won't stop pleasing a new owner, right? Tut tut tut." Her voice was so loud. In contrast, Mississippi Maid lowered her head and was absolutely silent at this moment. The atmosphere seemed to become weird all of a sudden. Longshaw frowned, wondering why Maid didn't fight back at this moment. She didn't dare to be careless at this moment. Suddenly, the black flame around Mississippi Maid disappeared little by little. She slowly stretched out her right hand and gathered the last bit of black flame in her palm. And the last bit of black flame was extinguished at this moment. From strong to weak, and then to the point where he could kill her with a gentle touch. At this moment, Mississippi Maid had become infinitely weak in the perception of the true dragon of the divine land. Oh, a slight sound was suddenly born at this moment. It was like the sound of a match being struck. It was a cluster of pure white flame that Longstraw had never seen before. It was born miraculously from the last bit of black flame in her palm. At this moment, Yi gently waved her palm at this moment, and the white flame instantly stretched out. Then a flag with a sharp blade flashed out. Mississippi Maid suddenly raised her head, staring at Kelowna Shinryu, who was dozens of meters away. Her deep blue eyes turned completely black at this moment. Black pupils. At the same time, Mississippi Maid disappeared. At the moment when Mississippi Maid's white flame was born and the flag appeared, Kelowna Shinryu felt the most terrible crisis ever. She suddenly realized that the maid in front of her didn't seem to be as tolerant as she imagined. In fact, she was actually easier to provoke than she imagined. She didn't have time to think about it. At the moment when Mississippi Maid disappeared, Shinryu Kelowna felt a great crisis. She didn't care whether the inhuman realm could withstand the explosion of Shinryu's power or not. At the moment of explosion, Mississippi Maid broke through the limitation of space and flashed in front of Shinryu Kelowna. The flag in her hand was like a spear drawing a white light. Xinyuan. At this moment, Longstraw instinctively summoned all her strength and even subconsciously called something, but in fact she had forgotten that this was not Kelowna. It was impossible to summon Xinyuan here. She didn't have the thing she wanted to call in her hand. She even waved her hand to the flag in Yu Ye's hand, which was burning with white flame. There was no sound, as if everything returned to a flat surface. A sharp art knife quietly cut the flat surface. Longshira's pupils suddenly contracted. She saw her arm separated from her shoulder, and at the same time felt something cut her body. A huge wound extended from her left shoulder all the way to her abdomen. Bright red blood mixed with specks of golden light burst out in an instant. She heard a boom in her brain, and then her mind went blank. Her body fell to the ground directly. Bang! The true dragon of the divine land who had fallen to the ground spat out a mouthful of blood. Her left arm had been cut off below the elbow. The severed arm was not far away. Such a crushing defeat brought a greater blow to Shinryu Kelowna than the time when Shinryu's power was confined and she had to turn into a child. She didn't have time to think. In the night sky, the flag with white flame formed a straight line, with Mississippi Maid directly pierced Longstraw. Sister Long. In the distance, an anxious and frightened voice suddenly sounded. Butterfly monster Luo Dance unfolded her colorful wings. The cry of butterfly monster didn't stop Miss Maid at this moment. The sharp spearhead on the flag was like a ray of light. A ray of light as bright as the sun burst in front of Longstraw. Sister Long. Luo Dance screamed again. Gulp. She couldn't even control her throat well, swallowing a mouthful of saliva. Longstraw's forehead was full of cold sweat, staring at the spearhead sticking to her cheek and finally piercing into the ground. Don't tell me that you missed because of a mistake. Or, Longstraw forced a smile with a drop of cold sweat quietly falling down. Are you going to observe the posture of a loser to satisfy your present pleasure? But it's a pity that I'm too thick-skinned to be depressed at all. The black pupils of Mississippi Maid seemed to have recovered. The white flame flag in her hand even dispersed with the wind. She regained her original elegance. But there was something different on her face. One more time, even if it's in Kelowna, I won't miss. She stared at Longstraw expressionlessly. I only have one master, and only one in the future, forever. She turned and left, leaving no time for Shinryu of Kelowna to speak. At this moment, Butterfly Monster hurriedly stopped, but the moment she met Mississippi Maid, she suddenly showed a frightened and flustered expression. This time, Mississippi Maid looked at Butterfly Monster and said indifferently, "Her arm is over there. If you pick it up now, you should be able to connect it back." Ah! Butterfly Monster suddenly quivered. Hurriedly running towards the direction indicated by Yu Yi, she found Sister Long's arm in the soil. But when the little butterfly monster turned around with her arms crossed, the maid from the club had already gone back. Sister Long, your arm. Luo Dance had to send the broken arm to Long Shua. But at this time, Kelowna of Shinryu didn't seem to care about the arm, just lying on the ground, letting the wound bleed, but the wound was healing quickly. Sister Longarm, Luo Dance had to remind her again. Kelowna of Shinryu moved his neck, glancing at butterfly monster beside him. A smile suddenly appeared on his gloomy face. Put it on my wound. It will heal naturally. The little butterfly monster followed the instructions of the true dragon of the divine land. After cleaning up the soil on the broken arm, she carefully placed the broken arm on the cut surface of the wound. When the broken arm touched the wound, traces of blood began to stretch out, entangling with the wound, and then the broken arm was restored little by little. Looking at this magical scene, she suddenly thought of the golden dragon, Fafnir. She wondered if it was possible to restore his male body in this way. But Fafnir had cut off his own organs, and she did not know where they were. After a while, the broken arm was fixed. Long Shua sat up with the help of Butterfly Monster. Sister Long, don't fight with Sister Yi next time. It's not good. She puffed up her cheeks in a fit of pique. There won't be a next time. Long Shua suddenly shook her head. If there's a next time, maybe I won't exist anymore. Sister Long? Long Shua touched Butterfly Monster's head, saying weakly, That's why I said there won't be a next time. What are you worried about? Luo Dance was confused. But Sister Long, why did you provoke Sister Yu Yi? Provoke? Kelowna's Shinryu shook her head. Whatever you say. But I just wanted to confirm something at first. Confirm something? She obviously didn't understand. Long Shua didn't intend to explain too much. She just looked at the direction where Miss Maid disappeared. Kelowna's Shinryu muttered to herself in an inconceivable tone. She was actually so furious because of these words. I can only assume that she was serious. So, maybe she didn't use the shop as a means to tie him up. Anyway, she didn't understand. Luo Dance just sat beside Long Shua like a duck, looking at Sister Long in a daze. After a while, Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly raised a broken arm, but the shape of the arm was a bit weird. Kelowna's Shinryu said expressionlessly, You fixed my arm upside down, so let's do it the old way. What? Butterfly Monster suddenly held her head, jumping around Long Shua as if she was laughing and playing. It didn't look like a terrible battle had just happened here. However, a small crack appeared at the edge of the inhuman domain because of this battle. It was like a curtain covering the backstage of a stage. When the gap suddenly opened a little, a scarlet eyeball appeared. It was like a chameleon's eyeball, turning strangely. Chapter 1406. At every moment, it was changing. Everyone was doing their own thing. If there was a protagonist, it would be no one. It would only be time, the all-embracing time. Later, it would become history. Doni woke up in a nightmare. There was no one around. She sat on the soft mattress alone. So where was this place? She remembered that she left the number 7 dormitory to look for Mina, and then came to a villa outside. Oh, she also remembered that she met several noble masters, and then, the sudden headache stimulated the girl. She hugged her head with both hands. The noble master, who liked to call her by her name, the father, who had always loved her and whom she was very attached to, was dead. She saw it with her own eyes dead. She would never see her father again. She would never be called by her father again. Doni was a child without a father. Such a Dooni! Such a Dooni! She got off the bed. Perhaps she didn't even know where she wanted to go. It was just a simple thought of moving. When she opened the door and looked at the empty corridor, she suddenly thought of what she was going to do. She was going to see her father. She was going to the square where her father was beheaded. There was thunder and lightning outside. It was the battlefield between Kelowna Shinryu and the maid of the club. It was the place where Busby and Meow were chased. It was a place full of dangers. But she didn't know these because she just wanted to go to the square where her father was killed. Father Boboki, Doni will come to you soon. Father, she wanted to go there. She walked out of here barefoot. When Shinryu returned to the villa in Kelowna, he couldn't find the girl. The black flame was just a seed of power. It was planted in Meow's body by Miss Maid to satisfy her desire as an avenger. There were two restrictions. The target could only be killed by vampires, and if the target was killed by someone other than a vampire, it would bring about its own death. The price was that most of the vampire's soul would be offered as a sacrifice, and only a small part of it would be used to drive the black flame. This was not Boss Luo's usual style. It was just a temporary supplement made by Miss Maid because she felt that her master's lifespan was suddenly decreasing. Miss Maid really couldn't bear to see her master's lifespan decreasing. She just wanted him to exist forever. Although her master liked high-quality souls and bright souls, it didn't mean that Miss Maid liked them too. She just liked to accompany her master to do what he liked. Before that, she was still a Miss Maid who had worked in the club for hundreds of years, so she knew how to get more sacrifices quickly and efficiently. And her master was still tolerant of her, as always, right? That was why there was Maiko now, a mortal who had mastered a terrifying power and had become a puppet of this power. Whether Maiko could wake up or not was not something that the servant girl cared about. In fact, Miss Maid was so ruthless from the very beginning. After all, she was the only one in many worlds. She was the girl of Orleans, the holy maiden who was respected by the whole country. But at the same time, she was reviled by the world and brought terror to the world. Therefore, for Miss Maid, it was good that Meow could hold on. If Meow couldn't hold on and died, it wouldn't be much worse. If she didn't have this chance, she probably couldn't walk out of the farm. Her original fate would not be free from misery. What she would encounter might be more desperate than despair. On the balcony of the villa, Miss Maid, who had just returned after beating up the true dragon of the divine land, silently watched the flame giant moving in the black flame. There was no emotion in her eyes. She was just quietly calculating the harvest of Maymao this time, calculating how much of her master's lifespan could be restored by these harvests. She just looked at it, but the switch on her body made a noise. Was Kelowna Shinryu weak? How could he be weak? She might be the limit of this planet. She was not in Kelowna because she didn't have unlimited power. The power she could use was still the strongest. But Miss Maid's body was just a puppet made by alchemy. The materials used to construct her body couldn't bear the power of the white flame. If the illusion on her body was removed at this moment, her limbs would already be filled with cracks. But she didn't care at all. She just smiled. I've recovered a lot. It was such a satisfied smile. The reason why Boss Luo didn't stop Long Shuo and Yu Yi was not because he didn't have enough time. Miss Maid came to his side as long as she wanted him to. He was the same, because he gave her such a convenient ability from the very beginning. He was just curious that his Miss Maid could be so active, curious that she didn't deal with the problem in a more appropriate way as usual, but chose to fight directly. He always thought that Yu Yi was a treasure that couldn't be discovered. Until now, there were still many unknown things about her that were waiting to be discovered. Sometimes Luochio also thought that if he didn't have such a continuous life, would he have enough time to know everything about her in his normal life? And a normal person's life was only enough to love one person. Feeling that his life was almost recovered, Luochio planned to continue to remove the restriction of neglecting to search on himself. But he thought about it and decided to put aside first. If there was another sudden consumption of a large amount of life force, Yu Yi would be worried. If Meow was just Miss Maid's usual method, then when she was worried, it was unknown whether she would do something out of the ordinary. However, since he had begun to notice that he should know more about the previous owner, since the original idea had been revived again, it was equivalent to opening a gap. This matter could be put aside for now. The burning black sea of fire in the farm had unknowingly extended to Luochio's side. But they wouldn't hurt him, they would just go around him. He looked up and saw that in the night sky, Busby had opened a barrier like a barrier to resist the giant palm of the flame giant. The barrier successfully resisted the erosion of the black flames, but the pure impact made Busby's body fall directly into the street of the farm. A big pit. In the pit, Busby spat out a mouthful of blood and quickly got up. He fell not far from Luaccio, but at this time he didn't notice that in the middle of the burning street there was a pair of eyes looking at everything. Busby quickly observed everything around him. There was no one on the street. Obviously, his subordinates had completed his orders, evacuating all the crops and related personnel in the farm. This was the only good news so far. But if the black sea of fire couldn't be extinguished, it would spread to the high wall and eventually affect the mating farm and the slaughterhouse on the other side of the high wall. If the farm was for the use of the higher nobles and was the embodiment of their privilege, then the slaughterhouse was the real granary that stabilized the clan. He could only beat the vampire killer here. Busby narrowed his eyes. The flame giant approached step by step, and the buildings couldn't stop its footsteps at all. The moment they met, they melted directly. He coughed out a mouthful of blood again, but it wasn't caused by the internal injuries. After consuming the essence of Marquis Gouda, his body finally adapted to the power, and after a short period of transformation, he coughed out the filthy blood. Busby wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and felt the different power in his body increasing. From now on, he was truly improved. At this moment, Miho, who was in the middle of the flames, had blood vessels appearing in her eyes. Her eyes were red, and her beautiful hair was stirred by the flames, standing up one by one. She waved her hand, and the flames actually raised her arm and slammed it down viciously. Busby didn't dare to be careless. He took a deep breath and spread his wings to fly up. At the same time, he also took out the clan's authority from his waist. The clan's authority had great power against the vampires in the clan, but against non-vampires, it was just a normal authority. But when it was forged, a special attribute was mixed in. Indestructible. This was a special magic spell that was added to the authority. Of course, there was nothing in this world that couldn't be destroyed. The attribute of indestructible was just a trick that allowed the authority to have a high-speed automatic recovery function. At this time, when all the humans in the farm had retreated, Busby, who had also finished digesting Marquis Gouda's power, finally had time to think about how to deal with the vampire killer. Busby already had some ideas about how to deal with the terrifying black flames. At this moment, his speed had been greatly improved, and it was obviously much easier for him to dodge the attacks of the flames. Busby began to wander around the area, and at the same time, he kept dismantling the materials on the buildings in the area, using them as throwing weapons. There was only one target, and that was the vampire killer inside the flame giant's body. The wildly thrown building materials were directly burned into ashes in the flame giant's body before they could even get close to Mihio. It seemed that this method couldn't hurt Mihio at all, but if one looked carefully, they would discover that every time the material was thrown, it seemed to advance a little bit. And with the different materials used, the depth of penetration would also change slightly. Even the speed of the throwing could affect the distance of the object. As long as it wasn't directly vaporized, there would be a short breakthrough no matter what. Suddenly, Busby's eyes focused. He had already tested all the materials that could be experimented on once, and he had a plan in mind. Against the rampaging vampire killer, Busby became even calmer. He was still throwing different materials. Unbeknownst to him, the flame giant was no longer deliberately blocking those things, because those things were not threatening, until a certain non-threatening material was burned into ashes in the flame giant's body. But this time, it was different because suddenly, something continued to shoot out from the ashes. It was the clan's authority of the Toridio clan. It was hidden in the building materials. And at the moment when the materials were burned into ashes, it had a second breakthrough. The flame giant's fire instantly melted the clan's authority, but its own special property allowed it to recover the moment it melted. In the blink of an eye, it had already undergone multiple transformations between melting and repairing, and in that instant, the clan's authority had pierced through Magong's shoulder. Busby couldn't help but feel pity in his heart. He hurriedly retrieved the clan's authority that pierced through Mihio's shoulder, but the clan's authority that he retrieved was now in a state of cooling after melting. It couldn't recover to its original state. Perhaps the special property of the authority had been destroyed by the flame giant's firepower after this incident. Busby, Mihio, who was stabbed, suddenly seemed to wake up a little. At this moment, she was holding the wound on her shoulder with one hand, dragging her staggering steps and driving the flame giant step by step toward Busby. He had to step back, looking for the next possibility. But at this moment, the flame began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye, as if it was starting to run out of energy. Busby narrowed his eyes and stopped himself from retreating. He felt that there was a chance of victory. Busby, unexpectedly, Mihio, who was inside the flame giant, suddenly let out a shrill scream. The shrinking flame giant expanded again and spread out, spewing out dozens of tornadoes. Busby's attack woke Mihio up from her madness after being injured, but at the same time, Mihio stopped attacking randomly. I fell into a trap. Busby was terrified. At this moment, the flame was about to reach him, and he couldn't even dodge. In a hurry, he could only open up a shield to block the flame outside his body. Layer by layer, the shields were directly burned away. It was now completely close to Busby's body. He had no choice but to bite down and use the last of his strength. The potential that was forced out caused his muscles to swell, even tearing apart the clothes on his body. Finally, the black flame swallowed him. The moment the black flame finally succeeded in swallowing Busby, it was also the moment it spread out. A figure fell from the sky, and at the same time, Mihio fell directly to the ground. The flame had actually spread out from her body automatically. Bang! Busby finally fell on the street. He was like a bloody man, and almost all the blood vessels in his body were broken. Obviously, he had reached some kind of limit. One more second. No, half a second. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel lucky. If this killer didn't go berserk and use his strength indiscriminately, perhaps the result would be different. Busby coughed violently and got up little by little. He couldn't even stand up, but at least he survived. The vampire's control of blood was like an instinct. The blood that burst out from the blood vessels began to flow back into his body. It didn't even require much strength. It was just like breathing, but the healing of the wound was obviously incomparable with normal conditions. Obviously, he didn't care about the wounds on his body, but he saw the bite on his body. Busby was stunned on the spot. He looked at his body, his chest, his arms. Even when he reached out to touch his shoulder, he could feel the obvious bite marks. These were the bite marks left after his blood was sucked. But he, as a vampire, why would he have such bite marks on his body? The moment he realized these bite marks, Busby suddenly felt extremely dizzy. He slammed his head hard, hoping to get rid of this feeling. At this moment, something penetrated his body from behind. It was a sharp blade. Vampire, go to hell. It was David, and the tang sword in his hand. Backstab. Chapter 1407. Of course, the current David would not let go of any chance he got. He would do anything to get what he wanted. He had never thought of ambushing Busby here. In fact, after waiting for Meow Meow for so long, he had given up on wasting time. Instead, he chose to work with Renas to enter the mating farm through the high wall. His target was the slaughterhouse at the back. Slaughterhouse was a factory of pure blood products. Every day, there would be blood products of different quality being exported. Even though Slaughterhouse was heavily guarded, it was much more relaxed than Farm, which was the most valuable place in the game. Renas agreed to David's idea almost immediately. Originally, she wanted to use this opportunity to escape from the farm and head to the worry-free paradise that the Revolutionary Army had created outside the farm. Both of them hit it off. However, what they did not expect was that when they came out of the sewers, what greeted them was the farm, burning with black flames, and the confrontation between Meow Meow and Busby. David soon learned about Busby's identity from Renas. Renas was shocked that Meow Meow could destroy the farm to such an extent. Is she really a human like us? She was, or at least she used to be. David only answered Renas's question in his heart. He did not even have time to talk to Renas because a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity suddenly appeared in front of him. Because of his relationship with Renas, he already knew about Busby's position in the clan. He was the person in charge of the entire clan's patrol team. Although Busby's position was not as high as the higher nobles, he had real power. He was the one with real power in the Torito clan. That was enough for him. Vampire, go to hell. When the Tang knife successfully pierced through Busby's back, David held his breath. He did it at the moment when Busby was at his weakest. Before this, David had already successfully killed a vampire. It was a satisfaction that he had never felt before. Now, he was able to kill another one with real power in the clan. He did not know what this feeling was. He only knew that he was excited like never before. Even a powerful vampire died in the hands of a weak human like him. Yes, it was the feeling of trampling a powerful guy under his feet. It was so irresistible. So, there are people like you in the Revolutionary Army. David, who was in ecstasy, couldn't help but be startled because the voice came from the front. It was Busby who was stabbed in the back by him. David couldn't help but be shocked. He subconsciously pulled back the Tang saber that had pierced into his opponent's body. However, at this moment, the Tang saber seemed to have been clamped down by an iron clamp. It didn't move at all. Busby reached out and grabbed the blade of the Tang saber. Still struggling? You damn vampire! David snorted. You didn't expect this, did you? To think that such a day would come where the one who had always been a slave under your control would personally kill him. How many of our compatriots have died in your hands? Today, I will avenge them. Go to hell. But David was still unable to remove the blade in Busby's body. Busby's hand that was holding the blade had been cut by the blade, and blood was flowing out. Facing David's roar, Busby, who felt his stamina draining away, suddenly said weakly, "Is that really all, human? What did you say? Is it really just for revenge and not for other things?" Busby lowered his head and said, "The smile on your face is like the audience in the arena." David's pupils suddenly contracted, because no matter how much hatred and anger were revealed in his eyes at this moment, the bottom half of his face showed a strange smile. "There's no need to know the truth at all. What did you say?" At this time, David only felt a huge force hit his chest. His ribs seemed to have all broken in an instant. Even when he was flying backward, blood kept spurting out of his mouth. He landed on the ground, but like a stone floating on the level surface, he kept drifting and finally hid in front of a pillar. David, who stopped, coughed out a mouthful of pus and blood again, but he couldn't get up. He struggled to get up several times, but all he got was endless pain. At this moment, Renas, who was with him, didn't dare to show herself. She just covered her mouth with both hands, curled up her body, and hid in the shadows of the street, trembling. Busby walked step by step toward David. His chest was still stabbed with the Tang knife from the back. Blood dripped down the blade and dripped to the ground. In the end, he arrived in front of David, who could not get up from the ground. Busby could barely stand, his body wobbling, but compared to David, who was like a pile of mud, he still had a great advantage, or so it seemed. David didn't give up. He reached for his waist with difficulty, but soon his face showed fear. The dagger that was supposed to be at his waist was gone. David's heart was beating wildly. That dagger was dropped when he was drifting on the ground, and it was a few meters away from him. If you want to kill, just kill. David's eyes suddenly dimmed. He actually thought of begging for mercy, but he knew that it was useless. Since begging for mercy didn't work, at least he would make himself look braver. Since begging for mercy didn't work, he hoped that his bravery could be seen or known by others, spread to the Revolutionary Army's base, spread to that person's ears, so that she wouldn't forget about him. Busby slowly stretched out his hand. The fingernails of his 5 fingers instantly changed into sharp blades. David subconsciously stopped breathing. He heard his crazy heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. Wait a minute. I can tell you where the Revolutionary Army's base is hidden. I can work for you. Finally, there was a smile on Busby's face. It wasn't a sneer or a sneer. It seemed to be meaningful, but it made David tremble with fear. "You actually aren't as brave as you look," Busby said as he stretched his finger to his lips. "Really, I can tell you all the information about the Revolutionary Army. The leader is a woman. Her name is Marlowe. She was originally a crop cultivated by the Norfeller clan's farm. You should be able to find out. Do you hate vampires? No, I don't hate them at all. Really, I can't find a reason to hate vampires now. Why should I hate them? They're so powerful and noble. David propped himself up and knelt in front of Busby. Noble Lord, please allow me to tell you more about the Revolutionary Army. Open your mouth, Busby said slowly. His voice was so hoarse that it was like the wind whistling through the gap of a door in the middle of the night. David swallowed his saliva. At this time, he could only brace himself and obey the other party's order. His chin trembled and opened little by little. At this time, Busby suddenly bit his finger and stretched it in front of David's face. A drop of dark red blood dripped from his fingertip into David's mouth. When he saw this drop of blood begin to grow bigger in Busby's fingertip due to the tension, David's heart beat wildly again. His mind even went blank until this drop of blood flowed down his throat like burning charcoal all the way to his body. David painfully grabbed his throat and coughed crazily. Blood. The blood in his body seemed to be boiling at this moment. David felt an unprecedented burning sensation, as if his soul was being burned. He howled crazily. His body even forgot the sharp pain from before and began to twitch and roll on the ground. Since you hate vampires so much, then from now on, live as a blood-sucking monster. Busby silently glanced at David, who was being tortured at this moment. After leaving this sentence, he slowly turned around and left this place bit by bit. He still had the tang knife in his body. He couldn't take it out. At least, he needed someone to pull it out from his back. But he didn't seem to care. His footsteps became more and more staggered. He even bent his waist and crawled forward. He passed by the place where Megaflo had fallen. He glanced at Megaflo, and he knew she was still breathing. He saw the faint glow of the fire on her cheek. But Busby still didn't care. He just walked forward, dragging his body forward, until he disappeared in this desolate street. Later, Boss Luo removed the zero perception on his body and slowly came to a place where David's dagger fell from his body. Luochio bent down and picked up the dagger, then glanced at the direction where Busby left. Boss Luo suddenly threw the dagger forward. The dagger finally fell beside David. At this moment, David's body had stopped twitching, but he still looked like he was in pain. He even kept clawing his face, leaving streaks of bright red blood marks. Clang! He heard the sound of the dagger falling in front of him. David looked forward. He saw the mysterious traveling merchant. He couldn't help but remember that he secretly stole the dagger from the traveling merchant. David's breath suddenly stopped. But Boss Luo didn't say anything. He just looked at David and revealed a smile. He just stood in front of David with a smile on his face, retreating step by step, and then gradually disappeared. David only felt that his breathing was about to stop. How long did it feel like he was suffocating? He felt a chill on his back. The fear even made him temporarily forget the burning feeling when the blood in his body was assimilated by the vampire's blood. He looked at the dagger in front of him and subconsciously reached out his hand. Trembling, he still didn't dare to really pick up the dagger. What does it mean? What does he mean? Investigate, not investigate. The last smile. What does it mean? Why did he look at me like that? Why did he smile? What does it mean? Questions, countless questions, crazily surged in David's mind. He still couldn't give a satisfactory answer. His trembling hand still stopped in front of the dagger. He didn't really pick it up. Until, what are you doing? A fair hand appeared in front of David and picked up the dagger. David raised his head and saw that it was Renas. David opened his mouth. Renas frowned at this time. She casually put the dagger on her belt, then leaned forward and helped David up with difficulty. What happened just now? Why did Sir Busby suddenly let you go? David's breath stopped for a moment. Renas. It seemed that she didn't see the scene where Busby fed him the vampire's blood. Maybe she still didn't know about this? I don't know. David shook his head and smiled bitterly. But at least I didn't die. No matter what, it's something to be happy about. Surviving is the most important thing. Renas agreed with this and then asked directly, how do you feel now? Can you still move? She didn't care about David that much, But now only David could take her to the paradise created by the Revolutionary Army for the descendants of the ancient race to live. She needed him. "I can walk, but not fast," David said rather weakly. His ribs were almost all broken, but at this moment, after the blood in his body boiled, the pain gradually weakened. "You check Meow's condition. Already checked when I came over. Your companion is still breathing," Renas hurriedly said. "I'm not strong enough to carry her. Let me do it." David gritted his teeth. "I still have some recovery potions with me." He didn't have any at all, but he could only use this excuse. Renas nodded without any doubt and took the initiative to run to Meow's side. Only then did David slowly breathe a sigh of relief. He found that he was getting more and more skilled at lying. "Creak ya!" At the door, the sound of the door axle grinding continued and was long and slow. Busby leaned against the door and raised his head to look into the room. Blood flowed out from the wound on his chest and soaked his boots. His bloody footprints were almost everywhere on the way here. Busby's eyes were dim, like a drowsy patient. His eyelids trembled as he tried to keep them open. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, only a sound similar to exhaling came out. In the room, the girl was sitting on the sofa. She rested her head on the corner of the sofa. Her jade-like hand was supporting her chin, and she just watched Busby come in. "Mina." Busby's voice suddenly became clearer. "Brother, you're back." The girl chuckled at this time and said softly, "Mina is hungry, brother." Between the girl's lips, two small sharp teeth were faintly discernible as the girl chuckled. Chapter 1408. In the room, Busby, as usual, pulled the girl into his arms, completely enveloping her. He talked to her. He did not want to remember what Meow Meow said about his identity. What he wanted to remember was that he was Busby, a child who walked out from the Lost Rift. He had been to the Lost Rift before, but it wasn't to hunt down the descendants of the ancients who had escaped and hid in the Lost Rift. It was because he used to live in the Lost Rift. He was one of those children who were born with mutations. He remembered that his father's name was Norman and his mother's name was Beakies. The ancients in the crack found out why the newborns were mutated, so they killed all the children. But he did not die. He hid. He hid in a place where no one could find him. He silently observed all the people, including his parents who gave birth to him. He saw with his own eyes that his parents broke the rules and were expelled from the settlement. He would secretly get some food that his parents could find and put it not far away from them. Later on, her parents gave birth to a new child. He felt that he was overjoyed. He thought that he would never have his own kind again. He had his own kind. Sister. He had a sister, but his parents seemed to want to kill his sister too, just like how they killed him and the other children like him. He took his sister away in anger. He left his parents with absolute fear. He took his sister and escaped from the crack. He began to hide near the farm. He named his sister Mina. Mina did not mutate. She was just an ordinary human, so he temporarily put Mina in the farm. He also met the person who gave him this identity and this power. Baligan. He became Baligan's confidant. How could it be possible? Mina died 10 years ago because she was overdosed by the name vampire. Those were all just nonsense. Mina. Wasn't Mina right here in his arms? Was it the extremely alluring smell of the blood of his loved ones surging and churning his blood-sucking instincts? Brother, are you hungry? Mina is ready. She always understands me this way. Busby greedily took in the girl's body fragrance and the sweet fragrance of fresh blood. He slowly lowered his head and opened his mouth that had vampire fangs. He gently kissed the girl's snow-white shoulder. Blood began to slowly flow into his mouth, then down his throat and slowly into his body. Vampires didn't have body temperature. They were a cold species. But the warmth of the blood made him so intoxicated that he could even hear Mina's low moans. It seemed to be painful, but it also seemed to carry some kind of joy. The room seemed to be so quiet. They hugged each other as if they couldn't tell each other apart. However, the mirror in the room wasn't so realistic. The reflection in the mirror was another scene. In the mirror, Busby's eyes seemed to have lost their focus as he knelt on the ground. As for the girl in front of him, she was hugging his neck, Her small mouth was on his neck, gently sucking on it. On the fair neck, the girl's throat even moved rhythmically. Busby's absent-minded face gradually showed a complicated expression as if he was in bliss. The low moans were actually his. The bite marks had always been on his body, and there were many of them. It turned out that he had been providing her with blood all along. He was the one who was named all along, but today the girl felt something different from usual. She quickly opened her eyes, and her lips moved away from Busby's neck. She reached out to wipe the blood on her lips, but at this moment, she felt it was hard to swallow. The girl's slender fingers began to scratch the bite marks on Busby's body. These bite marks were her masterpiece and could never be erased. In fact, the taste of vampire's blood was more delicious than human blood. The girl had never felt strange about why she could drink vampire's blood. Just like how vampires could gain immortality and strength by drinking human blood. In that case, there must be some individuals who treat vampires as food for themselves. It turns out that you've woken up, the girl whispered. There's no way to feel the happiness of a brother from you. Mina, Busby slowly raised his head. He, who was kneeling on the ground, looked at the girl's face in a daze. What he could see was nothing but a blur. In fact, he couldn't see clearly. He couldn't see what this face looked like. Mina is here. The girl gently hugged Busby's head again. She's always here, brother. Always. Busby slowly closed his eyes, lowered his head, and completely buried himself in the girl's embrace. There will be a good dream that you'll never wake up from. The girl gently whispered the last words in his ear. When she let go of Busby's hands, he fell to the ground. In fact, there was a huge wound on Busby's chest. The tang knife that was stabbed in his back had been pushed out of his chest by him. The knife was thrown at the door at this time, and the blade was still dripping with blood. The girl picked up the tang knife and returned to Busby's side. She used the blade to draw on Busby's body, and then suddenly pierced the blade into Busby's body. She directly dug out his heart from his body and held it in her hands. The heart's blood completely soaked the girl's hands. His heart was still burning, and it would beat for a long, long time. The girl suddenly put the heart to her lips. She opened her mouth as if she was going to eat the heart like this. Her face was full of expectation. Isn't it a pity to eat it like this? Then, somewhere in the room, a voice suddenly sounded. The girl slowly raised her head and saw the noble master who was playing the king's game with her in the villa. You're here. The girl was not afraid. Even if she was holding a beating heart with both hands, she still showed an innocent and beautiful smile. The noble master in the villa. Soon, we'll reach the high walls soon. Renas's voice sounded with a hint of urgency in David's ears. David just tightened his face, not knowing what he was thinking. He didn't pay too much attention to Renas's excitement at this time. His body had unknowingly recovered. The degree of recovery was even much better than using some of the secret medicines that the Revolutionary Army had painstakingly obtained. He was a little frightened of the changes in his body. David had been engaged in secret resistance activities all these years, so he knew too well that vampires had many means to control humans. The one called Busby didn't choose to kill him, but used such a method instead, which made David even more worried. If he was really transformed by Busby, then Busby would be his senior and could completely control his life and death. Compared to simply killing David, this was obviously more effective. David asked himself if he was in David's shoes. He probably wouldn't choose to kill David directly. Instead, he would convert David, and that would be equivalent to gaining a servant who couldn't betray him. David, who couldn't find the source of his hatred for vampires, wouldn't resist becoming a vampire. What he resisted was that even if he had power, he would still be controlled by others and become a vampire's slave. He longed for the power of freedom. While he was thinking, David suddenly felt a slight movement from Mayo on his back. Mayo seemed to have woken up. David, you're finally awake. That's great. He immediately put on an excited expression. What on earth? Mayo only felt a splitting headache. You had a big fight with the vampire, and in the end, David briefly explained what happened. Basically, he just omitted the part where he ate a drop of Busby's blood. Is that so? In the end, I still couldn't kill the traitor. Mayo couldn't help but smile bitterly. In order to accumulate power, she took the risk to kill many superior nobles. But the overly powerful black flame made it impossible for her to control, and in the end, she could only lose control. Looking at the destroyed state of the farm, Mayo couldn't help but have a complicated look in her eyes. Traitor? Renas, who was listening silently, couldn't help but ask curiously, "You know Sir Busby?" Mayo just frowned, and David seemed to have sensed Mayo's thoughts, so he directly said, "She's called Renas, and she's currently our companion. Don't worry." Mayo just pondered for a moment, but didn't say anything. Now that she was seriously exhausted, she was so weak that she could only walk on David's back. But she answered Renas's question. "That guy and I grew up in the farm at the same time. We became adults 10 years ago." "What?" Renas couldn't help but be shocked. "I heard that Sir Busby has a very high authority in the clan. He really came from the farm, like us. Is he also a descendant of the ancients?" "Because his predecessor was the acting Grand Duke of the clan," Mayo said calmly. Mimi said calmly, "I don't know why Busby was so willing in the end, but he was chosen by the acting Grand Duke of the clan, Balegan, and turned into a vampire himself. So, even though it has only been less than 10 years, I think it's not strange for him to quickly gain power with the help of the acting Grand Duke." David listened silently, memorizing the information word by word. "Then, you said he's a traitor." Renas wanted to say something, but stopped. Mayo said coldly, "A guy who said he wanted to destroy all vampires, but in the end, he was willing to become a vampire himself, and in turn, he slaughtered us. If he's not a traitor, then what is he?" Renas could feel the hatred in Mayo's tone, so she immediately stopped asking and lowered her head. David also didn't say anything. He could clearly feel Mayo's hatred. But now, if his matter was exposed, should he, at this place, give her? David's eyes suddenly became gloomy and cold. But the night hid his eyes well. Under the increasingly fierce eyes, David's eyes even turned slightly red. Bang! A loud sound suddenly came from the high wall not far ahead. The three of them subconsciously looked up, only to see a part of the high stone wall suddenly collapsed. And at the same time, a group of vampires wearing the uniform of the inspectorate was fleeing from the high wall in panic. David was shocked and subconsciously focused his eyes. Not only his body's recovery ability was suddenly enhanced, but even his eyesight in the dark had also improved a lot. When David peeked through the high wall, he couldn't help but be stunned. What did he see? He saw the cunning and insidious woman who sneaked up on him from behind. At this moment, she was actually standing in the middle of the high wall, surrounded by people, like a goddess. In the end, what happened to this shameless woman? Before he could think about it, he saw those low-level vampires of the inspectorate who were fleeing in panic were actually shot down by the humans in the high wall with something. Mayo frowned, and then her eyes flashed. She drew out the black flame in her body and burned it on one of the fallen vampires. The black flame that was nourished by the life of the vampires suddenly grew a little stronger. "David, put me down. I feel better," she suddenly said to David softly. David didn't hear a trace of gentleness in her words. He only felt cold sweat all over his body. She noticed it. David tried his best not to show any disharmony and slowly put Mayo down. Mayo, who was down, immediately began to drive the black flame to kill those low-level vampires of the inspectorate who were shot down. He secretly breathed a sigh of relief. But at this moment, he had to temporarily suppress a certain thought in his mind, because he didn't know if he would be seen if he did it now. At this moment, a female voice suddenly sounded in the entire farm town. It seemed to be transmitted through a certain channel. "All humans and vampires in the farm, listen up. I, Amanda, the warrior who is favored by Goddess and is now officially announcing. This place has been conquered by us." And Goddessin? Not only David, but even Mayo and Renas were dumbfounded at this moment. They looked at the high wall and at the speech of a woman who was emitting a dazzling light. "We will liberate this place. Listen, as long as you believe in Goddessin, you will be saved." so shameful, and who was surrounded by people, only wanted to find a hole to bury herself in at this moment. Chapter 1409. What happened outside the farm seemed to have nothing to do with this place. Only the blood slowly flowed out from the heart in the girl's hand. Its heartbeat seemed to be slowing down as if it would stop at any time. "You're here, Mr. Noble of the villa." The girl didn't seem to have the intention to put down the heart. She still had the usual pure smile on her face and asked obediently, "Are you here today, Mina?" Boss Luo, who had shown up naturally, didn't intend to hide himself. He casually glanced at Busby, who fell on the ground. Perhaps he who had lost his heart was not even a corpse at this time. The source of all vampires was their heart. Busby was actually in the girl's hand. "Mr. Noble?" The girl showed a curious look at this time. She didn't care about her appearance at this time. She still didn't intend to put down the heart in her hand. Luochio said slowly, "If Busby is dead, will he continue to use the name Mina?" "Mr. Noble, what are you talking about?" The girl chuckled at this time. "I'm Mina." Boss Luo just smiled slightly, but didn't say anything. The smile on the girl's face faded gradually, or her appearance as Mina faded gradually. It was a gradual change of face. The girl's lips began to move to both sides of her cheeks. Her eyes were curved like two real crescent moons. Even she didn't have a nose. This wasn't a normal human face. It didn't look like a human's face. Finally, her skin turned gray. In fact, it was scary. Holding the bloody heart in her hand, the girl with a little bloodstain on her dress changed her face in this dim room. "What kind of character setting does Mr. Noble like?" The girl, she giggled at this time. "I can change into whatever you like, and it will be the best character setting. Anything is fine." Luochio thought for a while and said, "I remember when you played the King's game. You once said that your favorite was your brother. Second, third, and even everything would be your brother." The girl's horrifying face, the cracked smile, suddenly disappeared. Luochio asked curiously, "I thought you wouldn't accept another persona." She regained her smile as soon as she looked good, and even her face began to change continuously. Different young girls' faces appeared on her face as if she was looking at flowers on horseback. Every one of them had exquisite features, each with their own merits. During this rapid transformation, Boss Luo even saw the appearance of the little butterfly demon. He saw that Long Shuo was a little younger. His face was very close to that of Shinryu S when he was a child, and Yu has blue eyes. Facing the girl's amazing performance, Boss Luo smiled and said, "They have all been eaten by you, just like him." He was referring to Busby, the girl knew. In the end, her face stopped changing, and she returned to her original appearance as Mina. She said in a troubled tone, "It seems that there are so many, but none of them are liked by the nobles. This is difficult. Isn't my original appearance good?" The girl said in distress, "No one will like my original appearance, no matter if it's human or the nobles, or even them." Boss Luo began to walk around the room. Under the girl's gaze, he came to the table. Luochio picked up a scroll of animal skin handbook on the table, glanced at it casually, and read a few sentences casually. "I can't find any food, and I don't have the strength to find food. I think I will die here with beakies. They are Norman and beakies." The girl smiled sweetly. "The nobles are so smart. They are my parents, and I am the second strange child born. I thought I was born with that appearance, so my parents despised me immediately." Luochio said, "I have read the diary. I remember Norman once wrote that as a mother, Beakies was even willing to use herself to feed the second child. So, will they still despise me?" "Yes." The girl's smile was still pure and beautiful. So pure and beautiful that it was scary. She said softly, "Only because the mother saw the cute child's face from the beginning. Do you hate them?" He rolled up the diary slowly and then put it on the table. If what the girl said was true, then even if this diary was written by Norman himself, there were still some unreal parts in it. From where it started, it was already fake. "Of course not," the young girl said excitedly. "How could that be? If there was no father and mother, I wouldn't be born." She held the vampire's heart in her hand, and like a happy bird, She began to spin her body and laughed. I won't have the chance to taste so many delicious things. The taste of human blood is very good. So is the blood of vampires. And I can eat all the things that make them happy. So I have always been very happy. Hee hee hee. Boss Luo was silent for a moment and suddenly said, I have seen your brother. The child, Norman, and Beakies gave birth to before you. The girl who was happily spinning her body as if dancing suddenly stopped, blinked her eyes, and said with slight surprise, So I really have a brother, Luaccio said. I have read the first diary to everyone at the beginning, and it was mentioned there. The girl shook her head and said pitifully, I forgot. Luaccio smiled and said, Actually, it is because of this that you became Mina. Probably the other ones that you ate were also sisters. The girl's Mina face faded again, and she changed back to her original ugly appearance. She said in a low voice, So, the noble master still doesn't intend to name me? Boss Luo shook his head and said, But you don't need me for the time being. The girl raised the heart in her hand a little higher and changed back to Mina's appearance again. She seemed to be unstable. At this time, she said in a more pitiful tone, But you see, this brother is going to break soon. I will be hungry. Boss Luo said, Actually, he is grateful to you from the bottom of his heart. In my opinion, you don't have to give up Busby now. The girl smiled and said, Really, the noble master. Brother Busby's blood has changed the taste. He has already discovered it, so he can't eat it anymore. Luaccio said casually, Is that really the case? Isn't this natural? The girl tilted her head and said, Brother Busby already knows the truth. Since he knows that I'm not the real Mina, then he definitely doesn't like me. Maybe, Luaccio said softly, compared to the real Mina, he will like, even love you more. The girl opened her mouth slightly. Luaccio said, Because after he lost, he found his sister again. So he will return here in the end, to your side, and is willing to fall into that fictitious relationship again. Liar. The girl suddenly puffed up her cheeks. The taste has obviously become so strange. It's different from what I've eaten before. It must have gone bad. Why did you drink it? Luaccio asked softly. The girl was startled and didn't seem to react. Boss Luo said, If we eat something unpleasant or spoiled or moldy, we will vomit it immediately. So, why did you drink so much just now? The girl was a little absent-minded. She suddenly smiled and said, Because I was hungry and didn't want to waste it. Besides, I couldn't find another brother immediately at that time. Isn't it because it's the first time you tasted this taste? Luo said slowly, When we first came to this world, we didn't even know whether the taste was good or bad. We just habitually define the things we often eat as delicious. Our taste buds have been guided since birth, so sometimes we can't tell whether the taste is good or bad for unfamiliar tastes. Maybe it's just like you now. The girl suddenly became vigilant and narrowed her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Then, Luaccio suddenly said, I'll come again after you think it through. By the way, someone is waiting for you. It seems that he saw Busby on the way, so he followed you here. Huh? The girl was startled, but the aristocrat in front of her had disappeared. Her attention was all on this aristocrat, and she had no time to care about other things. She abruptly turned around and saw that there was indeed someone standing there in a daze at the entrance. Duoni? The girl called out her name in surprise. Facing Duoni, who appeared at the entrance, a trace of panic flashed across the girl's face. But she soon recovered and said with a smile, Duoni, what are you doing here? It's so late. If you don't sleep, you'll be scolded by the housemaster. She didn't put down the heart in her hand, but Duoni didn't care about it. She just walked into the room slowly. When she walked on the carpet, she left light red footprints. She came barefoot and stepped on a lot of stones on the way, so the soles of her feet were already cut. Duoni, what's wrong? The girl took a step forward. Duoni looked at her in a daze. Her lips moved slightly. Mina, Daddy Ricky, he's dead. I saw him die. Mina, I'm so tired. I feel like I can't breathe. Don't be afraid, Duoni. The girl said softly. Your father's not dead. He's still alive. Look, who am I? The girl's face began to change. But at this time, Duoni suddenly held her head and screamed. She screamed hysterically. Suddenly, under the girl's astonishment, Duoni quickly picked up the tang knife on the ground and stabbed forward with both hands. The knife stabbed into the girl's body. It went through her body. Duoni? I saw it. I saw you. He killed my father. It's you, it's all your fault. It's all your fault. Give my father back to me. She used all her strength to push the handle of the knife and stabbed it deeper into the girl's body. She even pushed the girl's body until she hit the wall. It's not true, it's not true. It's all a lie. It's all a lie. She continued to speak crazily as she stared at the girl's Mina face. You're not Mina. You're not Mina. The girl spat out a mouthful of blood. She didn't know how the knife stab into her body could cause such a wound. She even heard some other sound. It wasn't the sound that should come from this room, but from outside. The sound echoed in the entire farm. She listened carefully. The so-called nobles just treat you as food. The so-called dangerous outside world and need to be protected are all lies. This farm is just a place that vampires set up to suck our blood. Look at these people. They were all taken away from the farm when they were adults. Look at these faces. Are there any familiar faces? Who remembers me? I used to live in the 3rd dorm. I'm only 20 years old this year. My name is Amanda. Who remembers me? What do you think is behind this high wall? It's hell. It's a slaughterhouse. It's the source of all pain. I'm Amanda. I'm the most loyal follower of Goddess, and repeating over and over again, the woman called Amanda kept repeating the same words to the entire farm. The girl's gaze returned from outside the window. She lowered her head and looked at Duo and I, who was still holding onto the hilt of the knife. She suddenly understood. So, it's like this. The stirring of the blade caused the girl's internal organs to be damaged once again. Then, she once again vomited out a large pool of dark red blood. Her face gradually faded, and bit by bit, it returned to the original face that didn't resemble anyone. It's already broken down. I don't want to know this. I only want my father. Give him back to me. Give him back to me. Give him back to me. She screamed and pulled out the tang knife again. It's fake. She stabbed the knife again. Liar. It's all fake. Liar. She pulled out the knife. It's all fake. It's all fake. I don't believe it. She slashed wildly. Give my father back to me. Give him back to me. Give Mina back to me. Die, 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 die. She slashed wildly. Duoni screamed at this time. Her hands trembled, and the tang knife fell to the ground. She covered her face and screamed in horror, and then ran out of the door in fear. Finally, the young girl whose body was covered with knife wounds slowly slid down the wall. The heart she was holding also left her palm and rolled out of her palm, rolling to the side, the distance of a fingertip. But she didn't seem to have the strength to close the distance between them. Chapter 14:10. They were eating a kind of biscuit made by grinding blue algae into powder. None of them spoke, making the cave seem so quiet. They were Norman and Beakies, an exiled man and woman. She's a monster, the man suddenly said, just like her brother, maybe even scarier. Monster? Who is it? I can't remember what he looks like. The woman lowered her head and said softly, as if she was blaming and resentful, I didn't even see him once, and you guys took him away. Took him away, then killed him. She suddenly became agitated, and her voice sounded like thunder in the narrow cave. Lower your voice. Do you want to wake her? This monster, the man said anxiously. He even stepped forward and covered the woman's mouth with his hand, staring into her eyes. Monster? Who is it? It's her. With a hint of horror, the woman subconsciously looked to the side. It was made of hay, some bark and algae, like a small bed in Nestle. Monster, who is it? On the small bed, a pair of eyes under the animal's skin, curved like a crescent moon, unlike a human's eyes, were looking at them in the cave. What do you want to do? Norman. The woman suddenly became terrified. The man suddenly got up with a cold face and walked in front of her. He raised a bone axe made of bones in his hand. She knew what the man wanted to do and screamed, You're crazy. We'll die. The man said in a low voice, She's a monster. As soon as he said that, the man gritted his teeth and reached out to take her out from under the animal skin quilt, lifting her up. Look carefully, this is it. This is a monster. She had gray skin, a cracked mouth, and teeth that were clearly visible like saw teeth, eyes that curved like a crescent moon, and a nose that didn't even have a human's. Monster. It's me. Do you see it clearly? The man's voice grew louder as he raised her up high. At the same time, his arm was trembling. He was afraid of something that even he didn't know. Finally, the man raised the bone axe in his hand again. No. The woman's voice was filled with grief, fear, and even anxiety. She hugged her man and shook her head violently. It's not like that, Norman. Look carefully. Please take a good look. Look at this child. She's not a monster. Look. He's crazy. The man's heart was filled with grief. He thought that the woman could no longer think normally. But he loved her after all. Otherwise, he wouldn't be willing to leave the place he lived to accompany her. He could only force himself to raise his head and take one last look at her. One last look as a final apology for the name he was unable to bear. Father. He would only take one last look at her, and after that, he would forget about her. He slowly raised his head and looked at the person whom he was holding by the back of the neck. This is our. He was shocked by the scene before him. In an instant, it was as if all the real and fake things were mixed together. Our child. He threw away the bone axe in his hand and hugged she in his arms. He looked at the woman excitedly. Look, Beakies. This is our child. She is not a monster. She is normal. Ha ha. Normal. The woman cried tears of joy. They hugged each other. In their arms, she slowly cracked her mouth full of saw-like teeth. It was like a smile. So, it was possible to make others like you. When the girl regained her consciousness, she didn't see Duoni anymore. But the weapon that had cut her countless times was thrown on the ground. The girl was a bit hesitant about why she could wake up. She suddenly felt strange all over her body. She raised her head and saw a scene that she couldn't understand until now. A heart that didn't beat anymore was hanging upside down above her head. From the blood vessels in the atrium of the heart, there were dark red muscle fibers that looked like blood vessels. These fibers seemed to weave a spider web, and Busby's heart was in the center of the spider web. Then, more muscle fibers grew out from another atrium and spread to the girl's body. She felt very comfortable. It covered all the wounds on her body that were cut by the tang knife. Many flagella grew out of the muscle fibers that stuck to the wounds and penetrated into her body little by little. The blood that splashed out when she was cut could no longer be seen on the ground. The blood that flowed out was absorbed and sent back to the girl's body. The vampire's ability to control blood. But it wasn't the girl's ability. It was the last bit of strength of the heart that was about to stop beating. Not only did it collect the girl's lost blood, but it also transferred the last essence of the heart into the girl's body. It didn't beat anymore. It was like an ordinary person's heart that was out of refrigeration and turned dark red. It wasn't fresh anymore and even slightly smelled. Perhaps it had started to rot inside, but it was squeezing out the last drop of blood from the heart. It was like a drop of water on a stalactite, a drop at the bottom of the atrium, expanding little by little. The girl watched this scene quietly. She didn't have an ordinary face, so even if she knew what expression she should make to express her feelings, she couldn't do it in the end. Maybe she could, but she needed to use someone else's appearance. She couldn't use her original appearance because she was a monster. Not only would she suck human blood, but she would also suck the blood of vampires and nibble away other people's happiness at the same time. When the last drop of blood was squeezed out of the atrium and dripped down, the girl subconsciously stretched out the tip of her tongue and instinctively accepted it. The last drop of blood fell on the tip of the girl's tongue, and the heart was completely rotten. The muscle fibers that stuck to the wall also peeled off. With the loss of the last bit of blood essence, the heart would die completely, and there would be nothing left of Baseby. It couldn't even be reborn with the help of the clan's blood pool. He was truly dead now. The girl stretched out her hands and caught the falling heart, but it suddenly turned into a pus-like substance in her palm and finally fell from her fingers. She finally swallowed the last drop of blood in her mouth without saying a word. It seemed like a long time had passed. The girl slowly stood up and walked out of the room silently. From here on, she didn't use anyone's appearance. She used her original appearance when she came to this world and walked into this world again. The streets were deserted, and there were traces of destruction everywhere. Vaguely, there seemed to be some sounds of fighting. That was the beginning of the humans' rebellion against the vampires. The descendants of the ancients who came out from the other side of the high wall were now chasing the remaining vampires. Whether it was the low-level vampires of the inspection team or the elites of the patrol team, they were all retreating at this time. They lost the support of the superior nobles. The superior nobles had already died under the flames of Meow's revenge. Even Sir Busby, who temporarily held the power of the clan, had disappeared at this moment. They were like headless flies without any effective command. The ancients opposite them had more and more terrifying weapons in their hands. A variety of powerful weapons emerged one after another. And Meow, this woman was like the Grim Reaper, constantly harvesting their lives in the dark night. Some of the naturalized humans who were originally working in the farm had the idea of defecting under the woman named Amanda's speech. They were actually this kind of reality because they had tried their best to become adults and experience the impact of the truth. Most of them had the same idea as Renas. But the children, crops, were different. They hadn't experienced this, and they didn't know what was the difference between offering and food. They didn't know what mating farm was for, but they knew the meaning of slaughterhouse. However, they didn't know that the slaughterhouse was actually one of them, a few of them, or maybe all of them in a certain batch. The crops began to wander on the dilapidated street in a daze. They cried, laughed, or walked away absent-mindedly, but they didn't know where they were going. The girl who walked on the street in her original appearance, at this time, silently walked past these children. None of the children noticed her existence, and she didn't stop for a moment because of the child. The sound of fighting gradually weakened. The number of vampires who represented the Tordo clan that could still resist was getting smaller and smaller. It was conceivable that vampires were a species that was extremely difficult to produce. Their numbers weren't high to begin with. But humans were different. There were many humans who were liberated from the mating farm, and there were even more humans who were liberated from the slaughterhouse. In this war, humans had an absolute advantage in numbers, and they had magical weapons that could fight against vampires. But who cares about these things? The girl thought silently in her heart. She was still walking forward as if she was looking for something. She felt that she was about to find it, but something was missing. Not long after, the girl saw Duoni again, and she paused slightly. But Duoni didn't seem to know and didn't remember. She just ran happily on the street. As usual, she would greet everyone in the farm or the town. But now she was dirty. Her favorite nightgown was covered in dust and blood, and her hair was messy. But her laughter seemed to be contagious. It seemed to be the only sound that those children who had lost their minds could hear. So they began to follow Duoni, and gradually there were more of them. Duoni's laughter was like a shepherd playing a flute in a myth, and they began to form a group behind Duoni. They all laughed and wandered around the dilapidated streets, talking about some of the things they usually talked about, as if nothing had happened, and everything was as usual. She watched them leave with Duoni and gradually disappear into the street. She suddenly felt that this would be the last time she would see these children. Now that they had disappeared, they had really disappeared. They had disappeared into something that was more real than reality. Finally, the last figure could no longer be seen. This time, she didn't step forward but slowly turn around. The girl saw Loaccio, who disappeared not long ago. He seemed to be waiting for Shith's arrival. Or rather, she took the initiative to find him this time. This time, the girl didn't call Boss Luo as a noble master. She even became very quiet, without a trace of naughtiness and naivety of Mina. Maybe it was because she had returned to her original appearance. This smell, what is it called? She raised her head. Her eyes, which were completely bent down, seemed to have no eyeballs, just two curved lines. Boss Luo walked to she. Sighed. He glanced at the thing in the girl's hands. It was a pile of residue that couldn't even be called rotten meat. He said slowly, when the superior nobles use character settings to feed crops, what do you think they need when they suck crops? It's blood. The taste of happiness. She almost didn't think about it, because she knew this too well. Because ever since she was born, she had all kinds of strange abilities. She was like a human, and she had human things, but she was also like a vampire, and she also had vampire things. She was a monster. Boss Luo shook his head. I think it should be called the taste of reality. She immediately refuted, but this is all fake. Everything is just a fiction. Fake things can be more real than real things. Luochio said softly. Just like them. Duoni? Thought, looking at the end of the street where the children and Duoni disappeared. She couldn't see anything anymore. Boss Luo nodded. For Busby, even if you are not the real Mina, it doesn't matter. To him, you're no different from the real Mina. To him, you're already real. So it's not that the taste has changed, but this is the taste it should have. Not through substitution, or even theft, but the taste that exists for you. It's delicious. She looked up, her sawtooth-like teeth opened slightly, and made an extremely unpleasant sound. Luochio asked softly, name? She shook her head. No, never. Then let's call you Mina. Luochio suddenly said. She was silent for a moment. She slowly picked up the heart residue in her hands, put it to her lips, and chewed little by little. It's the taste of reality. Then Mina laughed and shed tears. Chapter 14:11. There will be such a day. Actually, she had never thought that such a day would come. Even though she had the habit of fantasizing, she had never imagined that such a day would come. We counterattacked the nobles, and even beat them, who were once high and mighty, to the ground. Looking at the nobles who were escorted to her, kneeling and begging for mercy, whom she could only obey in the past, and quietly pinched her well-hidden belly. I seem to have eaten a little too much recently. How should I deal with these nobles, these vampires? Based on what she did before, once she said something like killing the vampires with a cold expression, the people around her would cheer and the brightness of the gems on her ring would increase. She gradually began to understand how to make the gems on her ring light up faster. However, she felt that there was something wrong with this method. There were many things that she couldn't understand. Now, she could only slowly discover and do it. Goddess, we found a few suspicious people in front. Lord Avatar wants to invite you over. Lord Avatar, this child is so fast. She complained in her heart. Then, she nodded at the person and said calmly, lead the way, under the guidance of the crowd, and quickly arrived at the place where the incident happened. She saw that there was a man and two women in the circle. At this time, when the crowd saw that the goddess had arrived, they made way for her. What happened? And asked in a low voice. Amanda walked up to her and knelt down before she said anything. Then, she said respectfully, Goddess, we found a few good guys. One of them said that he knows you, and was stunned, but she wasn't too surprised after that. How? She was originally a dormitory supervisor in the farm and often walked around the farm. It was impossible that no one knew her, but she couldn't help but be curious. Who could it be? Thus, under Avatar's protection, and walked through the crowd step by step and finally arrived in front of the three surrounded humans. It's you, when she saw the other party, and was stunned at first, and then opened her mouth. Who did she see? She was surprised to see David here, the guy she had hit with a black stick. This is so awkward. I also didn't expect that I would meet you here. In the crowd, David looked at Anne with a complicated expression. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. In fact, he had started to have these thoughts when he saw her on the high wall, and didn't care about David's answer, but the people around her didn't think so. This was especially the case for Amanda, who immediately glared at David with an unfriendly gaze. This made David feel extremely uneasy, and a chill run down his back. The people here were looking at him as if they were looking at their greatest enemy. Meow suddenly came to David's side. Perhaps it was because she had killed a lot of vampires, or perhaps it was because of some other reason, but her body naturally emitted a kind of frightening aura. Especially the bunch of black flames stuck to her cheeks. It was really too strange. And was it really in? I'm Renas, Linus of the Inspectorate. Do you still remember me? However, Renas didn't care at this time. She was a little emotional and quickly walked toward and without saying anything. However, she didn't expect that before she could take a few steps, she was already blocked by the people around her. Renas was pressed to the ground by two men with sticks. Then, another two men directly grabbed her hands, causing Renas to become frightened. Let her go, and saw this and could only shout at the rather fanatical protectors around her. She had a feeling that this group of goddess guards, which she didn't even know when they were formed, had been led astray by Amanda. The protectors loyally carried out Goddess N's order and directly released Renas. And then continued, I do know these people. I have something to discuss with them alone. You all should disperse first. Other than Amanda, the other protectors didn't object. As for Amanda, she only hesitated for a moment before dispersing as well. However, she later told everyone not to go too far away. Everyone was still watching closely, after standing in silence for a while, and took the initiative to speak. So, this is the companion you said must be saved? But it seems like she doesn't need it. And was obviously talking about Meow. Anyone who saw Meow right now wouldn't think that she was a weak girl who needed someone to save her. Meow just moved closer to David and whispered, David, who is she? David said seriously, I met her in the 7th dormitory. She claimed to be a naturalized human, a dormitory warden backup. At that time, she was being interrogated by a few Inspector humans. I saved her, and at the same time, I hoped that she could help me find you all on the farm. After that, some unpleasant things happened. As for why she is now, David stopped here and looked around. His meaning was quite clear. Meow nodded. In fact, she didn't have much dislike for this group of people, from and to everyone around her. On the contrary, she was more curious about them. This was also the first time she saw a human face vampires, and they even won an overwhelming victory. This was really inconceivable. She hated vampires, so she was very supportive of those who were enemies of vampires. You can say that I've encountered a lot of things. And smiled awkwardly and quickly said, David, let's just pretend that the unpleasant things didn't happen. After all, I just wanted to protect myself. As for now, and looked around and coughed lightly. You still haven't found your companions? I think I can help you now. You see, how should I put it? At least this place seems to have been taken down by me. That was a very flirtatious sentence. David's gaze was very complicated. He even thought that and must have gotten something from the merchant, which led to her current situation. What did she get from the merchant? Meow. What did she get from the merchant? Why am I the only one? David shook his head slightly. Thank you for thinking of helping me, but I don't need it anymore. The companions I'm looking for, except for Meow, have all been sacrificed. However, I wonder if you have seen my other companions? They are together. They were planning to sneak into the mating farm and said directly, the group you're talking about, I know where they are. Really? David opened his mouth in surprise and gently twirled her hair with her fingers and nodded. We met a group of people on the way. They were hiding in the manure pit. My men found them and saved them. I'll get someone to bring them here. Just came here. David's pupils shrank slightly, and then he was overjoyed. Thank you so much, and was not used to this guy suddenly being so polite, but thinking that this guy was willing to take the risk and stay in the farm to look for his companions, she thought that he had a good character. How about this? Seeing that you're tired, I'll get someone to take you to rest. At this time, and waved her hand and signaled for Amanda, who was not far away, to come over. It's also good for you to meet up with your companions. Now, the farm is basically suppressed, but I can't say for sure if there are any remnants of Torito hiding somewhere, so you guys better be careful. We will, David said seriously. After that, under Anne's order, Amanda quickly called a few people to take David and the other two away. Goddess! After David and the others were taken away, Amanda suddenly walked up to and said, This man has a vampire-like smell on him, and blinked her eyes and thought for a moment before saying, It should be from the battle with the vampires, right? Didn't everyone have a lot of vampires' blood on them too? Be careful, Amanda said seriously, and thought for a while and said, You've seen the people from the Revolutionary Army that we saved, right? This David is the person in charge of this operation, and he even volunteered to stay and save his companions. Logically speaking, there should be no problem with his character, although this guy's methods are a bit tough. After all, it was David who saved her from those men from the inspection team. Great goddess. Amanda took a step forward, her eyes shining brightly. And who couldn't bear Amanda's gaze looked away and then said, Well, if you're worried, you can pay more attention. There's no harm anyway. She didn't know if it was because she was tired or something else, but she felt that David seemed a bit different after seeing him again. But then she remembered that David used his memories before he became an adult to exchange for the weapon. Perhaps it would change David more or less. Today's events were enough, and didn't want to spend too much time thinking about David. Compared to the fact that she was the goddess of so many rescued descendants of the ancients, David's matter was too insignificant. Oh, right, at this moment, and suddenly called out to Amanda, I have something to do. Can you help me with it? My honor. Amanda's emotions were instantly lifted, and was already used to this, and said casually, Go to the monastery and hide something under the floor of the confession room. After you take it out, just light it up. Just light it up. Without asking why, Amanda went to carry out the task without saying anything. Seeing Amanda leave quickly, and couldn't help but yawn. She was really tired today, and now she just wanted to find a place to rest. I wonder if that guy will be scared to death when he comes over, and patted her shoulder and walked to the resting room, prepared for the believers. She mocked herself. I'm the goddess. Search this place. Once you find the remaining vampires, kill them immediately. The humans who were saved from the slaughterhouse hated vampires much more than the humans in the mating farm. Their worship of the goddess was also more fanatical. At the same time, they were also the ones who rushed to the forefront in the battle. The goddess is resting. We must completely clean up this place before she wakes up. We must not let the dirty vampires tarnish the place where the goddess stands. That's right. Today is the day of victory. This is the place where we liberate. This is the holy land where we are reborn. We must not allow any filth to exist. They were so pure, either black or white. In this group of goddesses that had just formed, there was no doubt about it. Captain, we found something in this house. A temporary troop armed to the teeth violently barged into the house. This was supposed to be a candy house. They found a pair of siblings hiding here with a trace of fear. They were humans, children who hadn't reached adulthood in the farm. Since they weren't vampires, the temporary troop was naturally more amiable. They were even gentle. They wanted to convey the greatness of the goddess into the siblings and save them from the abyss of pain. It's okay now. From now on, you are free. You can even continue your previous life, because we will protect you. They were even blindly confident. The brother and sister hugged each other and curled up. Facing the person in front of them, they silently nodded their heads, but their gazes were even more vacant. They were different from those crops that had collapsed, and they were also different from those children that had completely gone crazy. He could only be sure that they were indeed humans. What are your names? Everyone looked at the young man, who was the elder brother. There were large areas of burns on his face, and his original appearance couldn't be recognized. Norman. The elder brother said his name nervously. My name is Busby. I'm in a number 9 dormitory. I'll be an adult in 1 month. Norman, right? Got it. The leader of the believers nodded and immediately looked at his sister, saying softly, What about you, child? Mina. The girl nestled in her brother's arms, looking at the world and the adults who showed kindness to her, and said her name softly. In the villa, Boss Luo carried the servant girl who couldn't move in the balcony and walked back to the room. Then he untied her clothes and began to carefully deal with her damaged parts. Soon, she became perfect again. Boss Luo didn't ask why the servant girl did it. He just sat behind her and began to comb her hair with a comb. She enjoyed the tranquility at this moment. What's that? She asked. She looked at the thing that her master put on the bedside table before tidying up her body. It was a blood-red gem-like thing. The power of the second child. Boss Luo smiled. She chose to be an ordinary person. An ordinary person? The servant girl tilted her head. Yes. Luochio kissed her forehead and chuckled. A simple, ordinary person who will be born, grow old, get sick and die, and have a family to accompany her. It's easy for her to obtain happiness. Really? Boss Luo said softly. It's no longer necessary. Just like what a certain acting Grand Duke once said, if the fake is real enough, there is no need to distinguish between the real and the fake. The sky was bright. Chapter 14:12. When it was close to dawn, a green smoke rose up from somewhere in the farm. It seemed to be some kind of signal. On the hillside in the distance, a piece of the lawn was suddenly lifted. A figure quickly stood up and left in a hurry. The person whispered in disbelief, "How could this happen? We must inform the leader as soon as possible." He disappeared in the direction of the night. Then the sun shone on this place. At dawn, it was very difficult to recover in this place. Kelowna's Shinryu stayed outside for a long time to recover some strength. She was barely able to cope with most of the problems, so she chose to return. As for what happened in the farm, since it had already come to this, the true dragon of China naturally did not choose to continue fooling around. In fact, she had learned to restrain herself a lot. After the experience of Kelowna's Shinryu knew that she wasn't really invincible in the world. Maybe she was before, but obviously not now. Of course, she was obviously unhappy, but this Kelowna's Shinryu didn't have the habit of keeping a straight face. So when she returned to the villa, she opened the door rudely with a pair of dead fish eyes. The followers of Goddess and were still wandering around the town. They hadn't expanded their range of activities to the villa yet, but it wouldn't take long for them to do so. "You're back." What surprised Long Shuo and Luo Dance was that when they returned to the villa, they saw Boss Luo wearing an apron and holding a plate of fried eggs. "Breakfast is ready. Come and eat." Boss Luo smiled at this time. "Miss Dance, I prepared the food for you." So the little butterfly gently bit her finger and glanced back and forth between Kelowna's Shinryu. Then she lowered her head and walked quickly away from Kelowna's Shinryu. She could only sigh in her heart. Long Shuo stared at Boss Luo with an unhappy look. But why did she seem to have seen this scene before? When she just returned home, she wore an apron and cooked breakfast. Oh, she had imagined this scene before. The true dragon of the divine land was stunned. It seemed to be unable to move as it stood at the entrance in a daze. Miss Long, Shiro, Kelowna's Shinryu murmured. Boss Luo blinked. Yes. Nothing. Kelowna's Shinryu was like a soldier being inspected in the square, striding quickly into the house. Luochio was amused, holding a plate of fried eggs, and walked into the living room. The little butterfly was sitting at the dining table obediently. Long Shuo sat there and looked at the ceiling, thinking about something. Suddenly, there was a yawn. A figure got up from the sofa and started to scratch her messy hair. It was Miss Witch. "Ah, it's already dawn." Maria rubbed her sleepy eyes, but she suddenly remembered something. She quickly reached out and touched her head. She found that the leather bag was still there, and she let out a long sigh of relief. "Good morning, Miss Maria." Boss Luo greeted her naturally. "Come and have breakfast." Maria nodded, then her shoulders drooped. "Last night, I fell asleep while sitting. I really can't oversleep on this sofa. My waist. Speaking of which, where did you pick this up from?" Kelowna's Shinryu squinted at her. "How could you sleep like a pig after such a big commotion last night?" But it was just a voice transmission, not a real voice. It was just that she didn't care about the ways of the world. Not that she didn't understand the ways of the world, definitely not to give face to the profiteer. Well, of course, it was like that. Boss Luo responded casually. "Compared to this, Miss Long, when do you plan to pay the first fee for the information? You should have given me a reminder." Kelowna's Shinryu's eyes widened. Then she gasped. She felt that she was really blind to talk to this profiteer last night. "Here, I'll give you as much as you want. Take it. Profiteer. Is one tube enough? Is it not enough for 2 tubes?" She said aloud, scaring Miss, which was about to eat the fried egg. She bit her tongue, but she didn't dare to shout, so she could only worry. Looking at Kelowna's Shinryu, who pinched up her sleeves and stretched out her fair arms, looking like she was saying, "Come and get it yourself if you dare." Boss Luo didn't know why he laughed out loud. It was a very relaxed and natural laugh. He said, "Wait until we go back. It's not safe for you here. It's better to preserve your strength. Also, next time, don't ask strange questions." Kelowna's Shinryu's ears reddened, but she still rolled her eyes, looking like an experienced driver, and even glanced at Boss Luo's certain part. The atmosphere was quite good, at least in Miss Witch's opinion. But, did I miss anything? Outside the living room, Miss Maid walked in slowly with a basket. In the basket were some staples, such as bread. She came to the table, put down the food, and smiled. "Miss Long, good morning. Did you have a good rest last night?" It seemed like a normal greeting, and there was nothing wrong with it. Maria thought. But why did it feel like the atmosphere had suddenly frozen? Kelowna's Shinryu squinted her eyes, revealing a big smile. "I had a good sleep. Thank you for your concern. It's lucky that no strange guy went crazy in the second half of the night." "That's good." Miss Maid nodded slightly, and immediately returned to Boss Luo's side, helping him to take off the apron. Shinryu's legs were shaking, and it was getting more and more violent. The power of Shinryu that recovered a little even leaked out, making the whole villa shake, and the dust on the ceiling fell down. What happened? Earthquake? Changes in the region? Maria suddenly panicked, and habitually reached for her collar. But the little butterfly monster blinked her eyes, patting on Kelowna's thigh to stop the shaking. Only the little butterfly monster was focused on eating breakfast, not thinking too much, and was as steady as an old dog. "It's stuffy here. I'll go out to get some fresh air." Longshaw suddenly stood up, holding the little butterfly monster's hand, and said expressionlessly, a whiff of coquettish perfume, suffocating. Bang! The door of the living room was slammed shut. Miss Witch, who was sitting carefully, lowered her head and didn't say anything. She only felt that the little brother of the healing magician was not as effective as the central air conditioner this time. "Miss Maria, do you like the breakfast? It's delicious, but it was still very healing. This morning was really fulfilling. By a certain witch, an unmarried young woman. After breakfast, let's leave this place," Luaccio suddenly said at this time. Maria was naturally a good choice. There was no better choice than this. For her, finding the golden dragon, solving the fertility problem of the golden dragon Fafnir, and receiving the reward from the Magician Association were the most important things. "Oh, right." Boss Luo smiled at this time. "Miss Maria, the golden dragon you're looking for is actually Teacher Milo-chan." "Oh, really? So Teacher Milo-chan is the golden dragon. What? Sister Long, where are we going? We haven't eaten breakfast yet. What a waste. I'm a little concerned about Hui Yao." After leaving the villa, Long Shua stretched herself. "I've taken a look at the situation of the farm. Such a big thing happened, but Hui Yao didn't appear. That's a little strange." "Sister Long, do you mean that Mr. Hui Yao is in danger?" Long Shua shook her head and said, "That's not it. Logically speaking, there are very few things that can really hurt him in the inhuman territory. I'm just a little concerned." She was concerned about the matter of purchasing Hui Yao's information through the intelligence channel last night. The information showed that Hui Yao had encountered some special opportunities. She could not think of any valuable opportunities that Hui Yao could encounter in this inhuman territory. That guy had already reached some kind of critical point through his own efforts. In Long Shua's opinion, if he had not been dedicated to studying the inhuman territory, to build a space where non-humans could coexist, and if he had not been studying the essence of magic, perhaps he would have taken the last step long ago. Speaking of which, Long Shua was somewhat unhappy. In Kelowna's system, there was no young leader among the new generation who could be comparable to Hui Yao. The only one, Lai Kaisheng, had become the target of public criticism and had already left. Qing Shazi could also do it, but there were too many mortal karma, and he himself did not seem to have the intention to break free from these karma. As for Fire Cloud Evil God, that reckless man's path was too wild. Whether he could live long was also a problem. Sun Shaosheng was originally hopeful, but this guy was drunk every day and only wanted to be happy. If it were not for the revival of the aura now, and the environment was very suitable for cultivation, he would not even remember that he could continue to cultivate. Black Water was like a model nanny of the Demon Realm's cubs. There were too many unknown variables in Mo Xiaofei, and he was even related to Xian Yuan, Emperor's Sword. As for Zhuefeng, he was the reincarnation of a greedy wolf. It was already fortunate that he would not embark on the path of chaos. Finding someone who can inherit is also like this. Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly smiled bitterly and subconsciously glanced at the little butterfly demon beside him. She was plucking a small flower on the road, then broke off the petals and put the flower core into her mouth to chew. Sister Long, what did you say just now? Kelowna's Shinryu just shook his head. He did not even think about the possibility in front of him. Let's go. Where is Hui Yao? I have some clues. Long Shirua said. Almost every place in the inhuman territory was under Hui Yao's construction. Then, only a few places that the entire inhuman territory system couldn't cover could provide Hui Yao with some so-called fortuitous encounters. The closest to here was undoubtedly the Lost Crack. As she was talking, Long Shi suddenly pulled the little butterfly demon, reached out and covered her mouth, and then flew into the canopy of the nearest big tree. She made a gesture of silence to Luo dance, indicating her to be quiet, and then began to look ahead. In the forest, several cloaked figures were moving forward at high speed. They soon stopped at the edge of the small forest. They were all wearing dark blue cloaks, field uniforms, and goggles. The leader was a woman with a mechanical right arm. The mechanical right arm did not look very high-tech. It was made of a material similar to brass. Rather than calling it a mechanical arm, it would be more appropriate to call it a right arm that looked more like a suit of armor. She was using a monocular to look ahead. Ahead was the current location of the farm. Leader Marlene, we used such precious coordinates to come here this time. Is it worth it? The woman with the mechanical arm, who was called Leader Amethyst, put down the binoculars and said, no matter what, David and the others have been sneaking into Torito's territory for a long time, but there hasn't been any news. Even if it is just to inquire about David and the others, it is worth it. Although the coordinates are precious, we still have a chance to live in the future. But one less companion is one less. And Leader Marlene looked back at the people around her at this time. Since the agreed signal has appeared, something important must have happened. I have to confirm it myself. Understood. With that said, everyone moved forward again, but they didn't move for long before they were forced to stop. They saw dozens of figures rushing out of the forest at this time. Their faces tightened. Then they stood back to back and put on a defensive posture. They looked around in shock and fear. They saw that these people were equipped with weapons they had never seen before, and they were expressionless. They couldn't tell whether they were friends or foes. Marlene. At this time, they heard a familiar voice. They were startled and saw a man slowly walking out of the crowd toward them. David. David, it's you. As the leader, Marlene was surprised by David. She frowned and couldn't judge the situation at the moment. Who is this? David smiled bitterly at this time. Don't ask me. I'm also confused now. But someone told me to wait here, and I'll figure it out soon. Marlene's frown deepened. Who? David opened his mouth, and when he was about to say his name, he subconsciously looked at the dozens of fully armed people around and changed his words. It's the goddess. The goddess who liberated Torito Farm. Goddess? Leader Marlene was stunned. David, are you sure you're not joking? David looked at the guards of the goddess who frowned because of Margot's words. He smiled bitterly and said, probably not. Chapter 14:13. The leader of the Revolutionary Army and a few other Revolutionary Army soldiers were quickly invited into the farm by the goddess, guards. As for Kelowna Shinryu, who was hiding in the tree, he was not interested in the things that had nothing to do with him. He pulled the little butterfly monster and headed towards the crack of the lost. The forest suddenly became quiet, or maybe it was like that. Not long after, two figures suddenly appeared here. If one looked carefully, they were the vampire girl, Elizabeth, and the third miss of the Zhong family, Zhong Luoyue. Perhaps because of their good luck, Elizabeth and Zhong Luoyue were happy to see what happened in the farm, last night. The actual situation was that after the third miss met the Radiance Tower Master, she pulled the vampire girl to the side and earnestly lectured her. Of course, the movement in the farm was so big that they could see it from afar. Therefore, these two people who were not directly related to the Toraidu clan simply hid outside. It was only when the sun rose that he moved closer, intending to take a closer look. In fact, thanks to the inhuman domain, even with the body of a vampire, they could maintain a certain level of mobility during the day. Because there was no real sunlight, even if they were a little sleepy, they did not need to hide. However, the third miss was very curious. She couldn't help but ask, "Why, Elizabeth, why does the sunlight of the inhuman domain not seem to do much harm to us?" The little girl could not explain. Originally, the number of times she entered the inhuman domain was quite limited. When her grandfather was still alive, he would not teach her such rare knowledge. She thought for a moment and said, "I'm not very clear about this. But I heard from my grandfather that the one who created the inhuman domain was with the purpose of allowing all inhumans to coexist. So, probably because of this, the problem of sunlight was also considered." That was equivalent to not saying anything. Jean Luoyue just nodded. However, he suddenly had a thought. It was true that the light source of the main world and the inhuman domain were all visible light. However, the damage that the inhuman domain could cause to vampires was almost negligible. Did this mean that the true source of damage to vampires was not pure sunlight, but some elements contained in sunlight? Ultraviolet, infrared, visible light. Ultraviolet or infrared? Just as he was thinking to himself, the vampire girl suddenly exclaimed in a low voice. Her voice seemed to contain a trace of surprise. What happened? The third miss could not help but be surprised. At this time, the vampire girl smiled and said, "I can sense Brother Luaccio, and I'm connected to him. Just now." Jean Luoyue could not help but smile bitterly. It seemed that while Elizabeth did not give up on using her telepathy ability all the way, but it turned out that guy was fine. However, while Elizabeth immediately frowned a little, but Brother Luaccio said that it's better for us not to enter the farm because the farm is now occupied by humans. The entire Torito clan, there are only a few left. She had seen vampires before. When the powerful Tordo clan resisted the mad golden dragon, she saw it clearly from the side. Thus, in the third young lady's opinion, humans, at least the captive humans in the inhuman domain, would not be able to resist the rule of the vampires, unless they possessed the destructive weapons of the modern human kingdoms. But obviously, this did not exist in the inhuman domain. Therefore, when she heard why Elizabeth's description, Jean Luoyue instinctively did not believe that she and why Elizabeth had only been away for one night. How did it become like this? However, when she thought of the various movements in the farm, she could not help but believe it. Most importantly, this information came from Luaccio. This mysterious man she met in the Gambling Gods Manor in South America had too many unbelievable things about him that she could not understand. Whilst did he say? Jean Luoyue pondered for a moment and asked. Why, Elizabeth looked up and said, "Brother Luaccio said that as long as we don't enter the farm now, it's fine. As for where to go, he did not say. He just said that as long as I like it, it's fine. What do you think?" Jean Luoyue looked at why Elizabeth and asked. The little girl lowered her head and thought for a moment. Then, she looked up and said firmly, "Let's go to the headquarters of the Magician Association. I want to become the student of the first Tower Master and become an excellent woman." Jean Luoyue was startled and said subconsciously, "I thought you would want to see that guy again," while Elizabeth shook her head and said in a low voice, "I feel that even if I'm by Brother Luaccio's side now, I won't be of much help. I might just be a trouble. So, I want to go and improve myself." "You will definitely become an excellent woman." Jean Luoyue touched the vampire girl's head lovingly. Why, Elizabeth smiled. "Yes, I will definitely become an excellent woman. Maybe not as good as Miss Yi, but there will definitely be a time when Brother Luaccio will pay attention to me." As for the fact that he already had Miss Yi as his girlfriend, it wasn't too important for vampires, because vampires had many lovers in the world of vampires. For example, Lady Eve, who turned Joan Luoyue into a vampire, had more than 10 boyfriends. This was not a strange thing. On the contrary, it was very common. So, the next time we meet, I must become an excellent woman. She inwardly encouraged herself, and in an instant, she was filled with an unprecedented vitality. They quickly changed their route and then headed toward the headquarters of the Magician Association according to the map of the Inhuman Domain that Elizabeth had bought from the Tordo clan earlier. Compared to Elizabeth's excitement at this time, the third lady felt a little pity. She felt pity for the connection she had built with many vampires in the Tordo clan during this period. It was not only those so-called magicians who were difficult to deal with. In this way, they gradually went far away with different thoughts. Margaret, and her companions were quickly brought to one of the buildings in the farm and settled down. Until now, when they saw the dilapidated scene in the farm and those vampires who were caught alive and burned in the square, Margaret and her companions had to believe David's words. But even so, they still couldn't really believe all this. Not only did humans resist, but they also won this miraculous victory. They were waiting in this room. At this time, they were depressed. Even later, the comrades of the Revolutionary Army who were captured by the failed operation had arrived and met with Margaret and her companions. They were still at a loss about the current situation. In short, when we see this so-called goddess, we should be able to understand. Margaret, the leader, said in a deep voice, "Before that, let's talk about your operation. David?" He only betrayed the memories before he became an adult, but he still remembered clearly what happened after he escaped from the farm and joined the Revolutionary Army. "We should have been betrayed." David frowned and said, "Otherwise, we wouldn't have been caught in one net. But who is the one who betrayed us?" He glanced at the people in this operation, but didn't see May's arrival. In fact, since she contacted and was arranged to stay in this place temporarily, May hadn't walked out of the door. "I can only think of the informant who was responsible for receiving us in the farm before this operation," David said finally. The Revolutionary Army had a very mysterious identity in the farm of different clans. Only the leaders and the veterans of the Revolutionary Army knew about this informant. For the absolute safety of the informant, even the Revolutionary Army soldiers in the operation wouldn't know who the informant was. They also agreed to never meet each other and never take the initiative to recognize each other. Impossible. Margaret shook her head directly at this time. "If the informant betrayed us, it wouldn't just be you. Even we would be in danger. But you have been captured for more than a month, and the Torito clan didn't test us at all." David lowered his gaze and didn't look at this woman who didn't look beautiful, had a face full of hardships, and even had a broken body. He whispered, "Then, I can't think of anyone else. However, there's one thing that I absolutely believe in, and that's my companions in this operation." "This matter is a bit strange," Margaret said in a low voice, but she seemed to want to say something, but the door of the room was pushed open at this time. After that, a woman in armor walked in with her head held high. After Amanda, there were 6 well-equipped men who followed her in. They stood on both sides. After that, a woman in gorgeous clothes and a veil slowly walked in. "You guys go out first. I have something to say to these people alone. Amanda, you also wait outside the door," the veiled woman said in a cold voice. She had a special kind of majestic aura. "Yes, goddess." She had to obey such an order. Although her eyes were so vigilant, she quickly left with her subordinates and closed the door. The veiled woman heaved a sigh of relief and then took off the veil on her face. She didn't look elegant at all. Her back was a little hunched, as if she was mentally and physically exhausted. "You?" Margaret stood up with her eyes wide open. Her face was full of surprise. "Goddess, long time no see. Sister Margaret." "Goddess," and casually greeted at this time, then walked to the small bar in the room without saying anything. She poured herself a glass of water and drank it without hesitation. "Margaret, you know her?" David frowned. He suddenly had an extremely absurd premonition, and his premonition was quickly confirmed. "Her name is Anne. Her specific identity." Margaret smiled bitterly at this time, She is the spy we planted in the farm of Torito clan. How is it possible? David's reaction was somewhat agitated. He subconsciously looked at this woman even, and waved her hand and said helplessly, I didn't actually do anything to you, right? I just knocked you out and tied you up. In that case, if you insisted on moving in the farm, only death would await you. I tied you up so that you wouldn't run around when you woke up and waited for you to calm down. No one would go to that utility room, usually, if you didn't loosen it. I could only say that you must have been lazy in your usual training. And if I really wanted to harm you, I wouldn't have knocked you out but stabbed you in the back. Why didn't you reveal your identity at the beginning? David couldn't help but frown and said in surprise, didn't we agree that the spy would never show up? And Sister Margaret also promised me that even if you were in danger, I could watch you die. If I can't guarantee my own safety, then I'm sorry, I won't accept this job. I don't mind if you want to die, but don't drag me down with you. Such words were undoubtedly harsh to the ears of these ambitious soldiers of the Revolutionary Army. They all looked at Anne with strange gazes. But this goddess who had inexplicably gained many followers didn't seem to care about this at all. She yawned and said, also, if the situation isn't right, I can even betray all of you to get a chance to survive. I can even ignore everything and leave when I have the chance. Isn't that right, Sister Margaret? Everyone looked at their leader. As the leader, Marlene slowly nodded and said helplessly, we can't ask the spies to do more, and we can't give them any rewards or promises. This is the most I can agree to. The reason why every spy can still agree is probably because there is still a trace of kindness in their hearts. I'm just greedy for life and afraid of death. I can leave a way out for myself in the situation where I can please both sides. And didn't care about this at all. But did she really not have a trace of kindness in her? David wasn't sure about this. At this moment, he only felt that he was being played. He didn't speak, just kept silent, and tried not to let the people around him see his abnormality at this time. He needed to carefully protect everything about himself, including some changes in his body. Fresh blood. She was already feeling hungry. They didn't care about David. They were more concerned about the development of the situation, especially the leader of the Revolutionary Army. And Leader Margaret was silent for a while before asking in a low voice, can you tell me what happened tonight? Why did you become their goddess? And thought for a while and said, Sister Margaret, I'm afraid I can't tell you this. But as for what to do next, I've thought about it for a long time. What do you want to say? Margaret frowned at this moment and suddenly said seriously, Big Sister Malu, I wonder if you plan to move that paradise of yours. What do you mean? She opened her mouth and said indifferently, I think I can provide enough protection for you now. Sister Margaret, let's declare war on the 13 families in the inhuman territory. At this moment, she wasn't the same person who poured a cup of water when she entered the door. She was more like the goddess of those humans outside the door when she came in with a veil. Chapter 14:14. The leader of the revolutionaries, Margaret, asked to have a private conversation with Anne, and agreed without hesitation. There were only the two of them in the room. Margaret had been involved in the revolutionary work since 30 years ago. After she became an adult, she escaped from the clan's farm and built a human revolutionary army step by step. At the same time, she created a secret place where humans could live without being hunted by vampires. Today, Malu was almost 50 years old, but she gave off the feeling of a woman in her early 30s. Although her body was damaged, she always exuded confidence and determination. She was different from Anne. She knew that and was fickle, selfish, and would even waver between betrayal and loyalty. She was like a ticking time bomb. However, only such a person would take the risk to become a secret agent in the clan's farm. She wouldn't let the vampires discover her thoughts because she was no different from the other naturalized humans. She would try her best to please the nobles. However, the Anne in front of her was different from the Anne Margaret had known all these years, and didn't speak at first. She just looked at Margaret's right arm and suddenly said, Sister Margaret, your right arm seems a little different from the last time we met. She slightly opened the palm of her metal right arm and casually clenched her fingers. She said indifferently, I got some help recently, after a moment of silence, and said, in addition to the vampires of the 13 clans, there are indeed many freaks with special interests in the inhuman domain. She knew very well what this woman called Margaret had done in order to build the Revolutionary Army in the beginning. She sold her body to please some magicians with special interests, or volunteered to be the experimental subject of some wanted witches, and so on. She had done everything that she could, and that I had never dared to imagine. Speaking of which, it has been 3 years since we last met, Margaret suddenly said. Margaret suddenly said, in the past 3 years, because of your secret information, we successfully saved 39 humans from the slaughterhouse of the Torador clan. They're living a good life now. Although I didn't know you were involved, I still want to thank you on behalf of them. And waved her hand. Sister Margaret, it's not the first time we've dealt with each other. There's no need to play the emotional card. Let's talk about it first. She pondered for a while and said, if that's the case, how do you plan to cooperate? I can't send those humans that I saved with great difficulty to live here just because you conquered this place. You have to know that while it's true that you've conquered this place, there are still 12 branches of the 13 clans other than Toridu. The 13 clans only occupy the upper echelons of the vampire world. There are even more vampires below them. You might not know how many vampires there are in this world. Now that you've taken over this clan's farm, you've touched upon the fundamental interests of the entire vampire world. I'm afraid what you're going to face next won't be as simple as you think. And said, I need more soldiers. I can provide them with enough weapons to fight against the vampires. Sister Margaret, if you don't declare war, how many people do you think you can save by yourself or the weak revolutionary army? How many people do you think are trapped in the farms of the big clans? 100? 200? You've done a lot in the past 30 years, and you've saved a lot of people. But at the same time, the number of humans who died in the hands of the 13 clans is far more than what you've saved. Margaret was silent and continued, the Revolutionary Army is still too weak after all. You don't have enough resources to develop and grow. According to the current model, you can only fight on a small scale and can't shake the foundation of the 13 clans. In order to not let the 13 ancient clans find you, you have to carefully hide. This naturally greatly restricts your development. Lastly, other than the humans who were born in the farm and were oppressed, who else in the inhuman domain would stand up to save the humans in the farm? Margaret could only smile bitterly. She knew very well that what and said was the current situation, and sighed. Let's say that the Revolutionary Army can remain undiscovered and you can continue to save individual humans. But have you thought about it, Sister Margaret? You're just a human. No matter how energetic you are, there will be a day when you'll be exhausted. We humans will get injured, grow old, and die. As long as the vampires can drink our blood, they don't have to worry about these things. So, you're confident that if you die one day, can the Revolutionary Army still be run as it is now? She was silent again, and changed her sitting position. Sister Margaret, your wish is to save all the humans in the 13 clans' captivity, right? She nodded, and said, if we don't start a war, ask yourself if you can take over all the humans here. I mean, the people who are following me now? Margaret smiled bitterly. There are many more humans in the 13 clans' farm than in our stronghold. It's impossible to accommodate them in a short time. And said, the Torador clan has been beaten back by us. Although their Grand Duke hasn't appeared yet, after this battle, almost all the upper-level nobles have died, and their elites have also been annihilated. So, whether you want to admit it or not, the war has started. So, whether you join us or not, I will still fight to the end. Margaret looked at him seriously and suddenly said, you are a bit different, and said indifferently, if I say, I've already died once, would you believe it? I need time to consider, Margaret said slowly, and stood up and nodded. Okay, but don't take too long, because I really need people now. At least, before other vampires discover this place and plan to take action, I want to build this farm into a defensible castle. With that, and quickly walked out of the room. Margaret felt that the original and would appear less and less in the future until she finally disappeared. She would become the goddess of those people outside. just because she died once. Margaret couldn't help but ponder. Is it really the golden dragon? Moreau, or Fafnir, was dragged out of the utility room at the bottom of the stairs by Maria with some difficulty. At this time, the golden dragon hadn't woken up yet. It seemed that it was not only knocked out by Kelowna's Shinryu, but it was also under some kind of Shinryu-S restriction. This is the golden dragon, but I don't know if it's the one you're looking for. Miss Maria, Miss Maid said with a smile. This master pansy was so stingy. Maria didn't even know what she had done to offend her, but was fine to accept it. There was no need to go against the wealth. So, Maria was more concerned about the golden dragon. The reason why the Magicians Association couldn't find a mate for the golden dragon is that the golden dragon is a pervert in female clothing. It doesn't like female creatures? Maybe it's possible. Boss Luo suddenly smiled slyly. Miss Maria, if it's just a psychological desire, perhaps there's no need to use drugs. Maria rubbed her chin and muttered, It's the golden dragon, and it's also Milo sauce. To be honest, anyone who has read Milo Sauce's column will think that she's a beautiful girl whose heart is about to explode. I actually admire a golden dragon in female clothing. She suddenly felt very confused. She felt that the little hope she had left as an older single woman seemed to have been shattered by someone. Maria suddenly quivered and slapped her thigh. Actually, this is easy. As long as there's enough aphrodisiac, even a sow can do it. Creatures can't go against their instincts. It doesn't matter if it likes a female or a male. It seemed that a certain Shinryu used this method at the beginning. Boss Luo couldn't help but have a subconscious thought. Are older women inclined to this simple and crude way of thinking? He even thought of Rin Xiling and quickly came to a conclusion. If she also encountered this problem, she should have the same way of thinking. So from a certain point of view, Maria, Kelowna, Shinryu, and Rin Xiling seem to have the same way of thinking. What do you think? Give me some suggestions? Oh, sorry, I was a little distracted. Boss Luo smiled slightly. Well, I think it's better to solve the problem from the root. As for using drugs, it seems that the reason why the golden dragon wreaked havoc yesterday was because it was fed with a lot of so-called aphrodisiac. Someone has already tried it? Is it someone from the Magicians Association? Maria seemed to be a little irritated as she paced back and forth. At this time, she had already forgotten that she was still in the clan's farm. All her thoughts were on the golden dragon. She suddenly looked at the master pansy that she had painstakingly invited. She had been in this craft paper bag for a day and a night, and had encountered so many dangerous things. She felt that it would be a waste if she didn't use this secret potion master. Master, you must be able to make a love potion that surpasses the 6-star level, right? Maria asked directly. Miss Maid seemed to have guessed the witch's idea. She thought for a while and said, This is your idea? There's nothing that love can't solve, Maria said with her chest out. As long as it falls in love with a woman, it will naturally have the need to have offspring. Actually, I think the Magicians Association should have known about the golden dragon's problem and thought of this long ago. They just don't have the ability to make a secret potion that surpasses the 6-star level. Because this commission was directly proposed by Maria to Miss Maid, Boss Luo didn't intend to directly participate this time. He just wanted to be a bystander, although the final profit would belong to him and the altar. Miss Maid seemed to have noticed that her master intended to be a bystander. She glanced at the golden dragon and then looked at Maria. She suddenly smiled and said, Are you sure? As long as it's a love potion that surpasses the 6-star level. Maria subconsciously wanted a nod. In the entire world of magicians, there was probably no one who could refuse the work of Master Pansy. But she immediately stopped herself and asked carefully, Master, what's the reward for this secret potion? That's true. Miss Maid chuckled. Let me think. According to the previous rules, I'll prepare the materials. Maria quickly said, Of course, the reward will be calculated separately. I need you, Miss Maid said abruptly. Maria couldn't help but be startled and pointed at herself. Need me? Need me? Do you need me to do something? Master, just tell me. I'll try my best to complete it. No, I just need you. Miss Maid said indifferently. Or another you, Teresa, or yourself, both are fine. Maria frowned and asked tentatively, Master, so, do you need me, or Teresa, to do something for you? Miss Maid suddenly narrowed her eyes and said, It's a waste of time to play dumb. Of course, if you don't really want to complete this deal, it's fine. Maria broke out in a cold sweat. She had known about Master Pansy for a long time. She also knew that many people who had looked for this master to refine secret potions never mentioned it until now. She should have been very careful, but she actually forgot the terrifying side of this master when she saw this old cow eating young grass. It was because she was too relaxed. Master, Maria didn't look very good at this time. She asked tentatively, Can you change another condition? Miss Maid stroked her face and said, Yes. This condition seems to be a bit too much for him. After all, I'm not a demon. It's fine to change another condition. This master is so easy to talk to? Or is it because of love? Maria subconsciously looked at Luaccio, who was drinking tea next to her, and gave him a thumbs up in her heart. Well down. Therefore, under Maria's anticipation, the maid slowly said, Since you want a 6-star love potion, as a reward, why don't you sell me all the love potion you have in your life? Maria's expectation fell through instantly. She froze on the spot. The mouth under the hood opened slightly, but she didn't choose to say anything in the end. You said you're not a demon? Chapter 14:15. Maria felt that she still wanted to struggle a little more with Master Pansy's request. However, Miss Maid didn't have any intention of bargaining. Maria had to look at Boss Luo for help, but she found that this little brother of hers didn't heal her this time. He didn't intend to do it himself. Forget it. It seems that I won't be able to earn this bounty. Maria shook her head. She just wanted to earn the bounty from the Magician Association. But there were many ways to earn money. She didn't need to agree to Master Pansy's request just for this one time. Young women don't deserve to have love. Can they sell their love as they wish? However, she finally understood why Master Pansy's products were sold at sky-high prices in the secret medicine industry. If every bottle of secret medicine made by Master Pansy had such a sad story behind it, it wouldn't be surprising. Are you going to give up a commission? Miss Maid asked indifferently. Maria smiled bitterly and said, I have to give up even if I don't want to. Although it's a pity to give up the bounty, it's not worth the loss. However, no matter what, I'm still very grateful for your company this time, even though many things have happened. They would never force each other to make a deal. Miss Maid didn't say anything and just nodded gently. The identity of a secret pharmacist was just a game that she had once made. As for the deals that she had made because of this identity, it was just a matter of convenience. Her job was naturally to be the club's maid. Miss Maria, what do you plan to do? Boss Luo suddenly asked at this time. Maria thought for a moment and said, Well, I'll probably go to one of the neutral chaotic areas to see if there's anything worth buying. After all, the British border is now under sanctions and the normal coordinates can't be used. Using illegal coordinates, once I have to get something. If I don't buy anything, my magic house will have nothing to sell. By the way, are you two planning to go back to the modern world now? Or do you plan to stay here for a while? Boss Luo casually said, Let's stop here for now. If there are no accidents later, we should be returning to the modern world. Maria nodded. She was just a witch who wanted to do business. Although it was a pity that the deal did not go through in the end, she was not too disappointed. As the saying goes, even if business is not done, there's still justice. Moreover, the other party was one of the 3 remaining secret potion masters in the world, and the most mysterious one at that. You will never understand what kind of great help knowing such a big shot will bring you in the future. After thinking for a while, Maria reached into her collar and took out a bottle. This is an unmarked coordinate. Maria gave the bottle to Miss Maid without hesitation. I can't let you come here for nothing. This unmarked coordinates will be the consultation fee this time. If you use it, you can enter the inhuman domain again at any time, even in Britain. Of course, Master, you must know the use of this thing, so I won't explain in detail. Looking at Maria's eager eyes, Miss Maid put away the unmarked coordinates with a smile. You're welcome. Seeing this scene, Boss Luo suddenly remembered something about Yu Yi. For example, she seemed to have different industries around the world. She also had this very mysterious bank account, and some strange collections and so on. She said that those were some trinkets that were given by some very enthusiastic customers in the past. It should be like this, right? Of course. Miss Maid also gave her own gift in return, a black card without any mark. She told Maria that if she wanted the secret potion in the future, she could contact Maria through the black card. Maria felt that it was a good deal. After all, she had hardly heard of anyone who could take the initiative to contact this mysterious secret potion master, so she was very happy to put the black card in her collar like a treasure. Then, I'll take my leave, both of you. She waved goodbye to Boss Luo and Miss Maid in front of the villa. In the end, she suddenly thought of something and turned back and said, "By the way, little brother, if you really want to explore the tomb of the pharaoh, I suggest you find a local guy called Kez to be your guide. In addition, he has a nickname, Golden Eyes. He's a local archaeologist who conducts research work." Golden Eyes? Boss Luo couldn't help but be startled. "Yes. Is there a problem?" Luochio shook his head and smiled slightly. "Nothing. I just suddenly thought of something. Thank you very much for your suggestion, Miss Maria." The witch shrugged and then took out a magic wand from her collar. Then, she threw out 2 seeds and turned them into a pumpkin car. Then, she drove all the way to the nearest neutral chaotic area. What she didn't realize was that just because of her kind suggestion, there was a golden mark on the pure black card that Master Pansy gave her. Maria didn't know about the black card for now, because she was more concerned about another thing. When the pumpkin car was far away from the villa and the farm behind had become a black, Miss Maria suddenly laughed out loud. She tore open the cover of the craft paper bag and took a deep breath of fresh air. Then, she licked her lips and put her hand into her collar. After a while, she finally took out a small bottle. Boss Luo asked Miss Maid to give her a bottle of potion to help Teresa's recovery. At least I didn't get nothing. She couldn't bear to let go of the bottle. She held it up to her cheeks, as if she was about to drool. This was also the work of the master, Pansy. Although it was only a recovery potion, it was still the work of Master Pansy. There was even her unique logo on the bottle. As for Teresa, she just lost a little blood. She would be fine after sleeping for a while. She didn't need to use any recovery potion at all. Even if she needed to, the ordinary recovery potions in her shop were more than enough. I'm rich. I'm rich this time. I'm really rich this time. After wiping away the saliva that was about to flow out, Miss Witch hurriedly took out a tool that could be used for instant communication from her necklaces. She contacted a very famous underground black market auctioneer in the Inhuman territory. "Oh, isn't this the poor Maria? What do you want from me? I'm very busy. Thousands of secret crystals fall every second. I have a bottle of Master Pansy's work in my hand. It's at least a 4-star recovery potion and has a unique anti-counterfeit mark. Oh, noble Ms. Maria, you're my mother." That was very real. At the old site of the Torito clan's castle, there was no trace of any vampires. There should have been a group of vampires left behind to rebuild the castle. He wondered if they chose to escape after learning about the farm, or if they rushed to the farm to provide support, but were ultimately destroyed by the humans who resisted. Of course, these were not important to Kelowna Shinryu. She came to the crack of the lost, pulled Luo Dance up, and jumped down. Shinryu's ability to sense individuals was very terrifying. She had already sensed the aura of Hui Yao, who had been here before. At the same time, the aura also went all the way into the crack. With her powerful spiritual sense, Kelowna Shinryu could almost find anyone except for a certain profiteer. However, what made Longshow more surprised was that when she was about to go deep into the crack, she saw a figure slowly flying out from the bottom of the crack. This was her purpose this time. It was the first tower owner of the Magician Association, Hui Yao. "Kid, teacher, I didn't expect that so many things would happen in Torito after I disappeared for one night." On the cliff, Hui Yao quietly listened to the simple narration of the true dragon of the divine land, as if he was listening to the most profound grimoire. Even the first tower master suddenly felt that his brain was not enough to process all of this. He actually wanted to continue to stay in the quiet village in the thick fog, but there were too many things that he couldn't let go of. He planned to come out and deal with the trivial matters. Then, he would return to the mysterious village in the middle of the fog and continue to ask the mysterious person called Cain about the exploration of the world and time. Perhaps there would be a long, closed-door training. Of course, he didn't forget that he had just intended to accept a student. Part of the reason for his temporary departure this time was to find a place for this student with extraordinary potential. Teacher, do you know why the humans in the farm suddenly had the power to resist? And the Radiance Tower master frowned. They even crippled the Torito clan. It was to cripple them, not exterminate them. This was because Hui Yao knew that not every vampire would live in the inhuman territory of their respective clans. For example, there would be many vampires from each of the 13 clans who would join the highest inspection team. They were responsible for supervising those vampires who didn't abide by the rules in the modern world. There were also some vampires who chose to live in a modern world because they liked the life in the modern world. Of course, there were also vampires who worked in the modern world to take care of the clan's assets. In short, there should still be many descendants of the Torito clan. However, it was inevitable that the clan's overall strength would fall to the bottom of the valley. They might not even be comparable to some of the new vampire clans. You ask me? Who should I ask? Long Shiruo looked up at the sky at this time. This is your territory, right? You don't even know. How do you expect me, a person who hasn't been here for decades, to know? Anyway, I'm just a leecher. It's none of my business. In fact, what else could it be? Of course, it was because of that profiteer who only knew how to flirt with the maid. However, Longshaw did not intend to confess this matter. She always felt that if her cheap disciple and her future man were to fight, F***CK, when I return to Kelowna, I must find that scheming woman and have a fight again. The master of the Radiance Tower smiled bitterly and said, Teacher is still the same as always. All right, I'll pay more attention to this matter. He rubbed his forehead. Not only was there the matter of the Michael Association, there was also the matter of the Golden Dragon's riot. Now, there was also the matter of the Torito clan. The master of the Radiance Tower suddenly felt that the idea of visiting Cain again in a short period of time seemed to be unrealistic. No matter what, Hui Yao slowly exhaled and sorted out the current situation. There's something that I need your help with. Say it. Long Shiruo waved her hand generously. Hui Yao, on the other hand, said respectfully, Teacher, the riot in Fafnir this time has caused damage to many places in the Inhuman domain and caused dissatisfaction among many Inhumans. I think it's not suitable for Fafnir to continue staying in the Inhuman domain for the time being. So, I hope that you could take care of Fafnir for a while. Actually, it's just to let it hide at your place for a while. The Shinryu of Kelowna seemed to be deflated and almost cursed out loud. Unfortunately, Hui Yao knew her weakness too well. He sighed and reflected on himself. He even said that as a student, he actually had to trouble his teacher and that he was really too lame, and so on and so forth. It made Long Shuo swallow her words. I can take care of it, but I can't guarantee that I'll beat this damn pervert up until he doubts his dragon life, if I'm in a bad mood. I think Fafnir will definitely cherish this period of time where he can listen to your teachings by your side. Hui Yao smiled casually. Long Shiruo felt that there was nothing else she could say. Since it was her own fault, she could only clean it up herself, even if she had to kneel down. Just like that, the Kelowna of Shinryu reluctantly walked back to the villa with the first pagoda master. Originally, Kelowna of Shinryu was worried that it would be difficult for her to explain herself if Hui Yao bumped into the profiteer and the scheming woman in the villa. However, she did not expect that when she returned to the villa, other than Fafnir, the two people were nowhere to be seen. They only left a note saying that they had gone back to the modern world first. Kelowna of Shinryu looked at the note. Her fingers were about to tear it apart. But in the end, she sighed and folded the note carefully. Then, she stuffed it into her purse and sat on the sofa without saying a word. Last night, she sat in this place and said something to that guy. It was the first time she said something to him in thousands of years. Huh, am I actually being dumped in a disguised way? Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly stood up. After beating up the unconscious golden dragon twice, he sat down silently and continued to stare blankly. She very well interpreted what she had said to Hui Yao. If he was in a bad mood, he might beat Fafnir until he doubted his dragon life. Brat. Yes, teacher. At this moment, facing Kelowna Shinryu, who was suddenly in a bad mood, the Radiance Pagoda's owner could not help but recall the painful experience of traveling the east to seek knowledge. He answered without thinking. Kelowna's Shinryu said sternly, "Tell me the exact location of the battlefield where you guys fought 100 years ago. I want to take a look at the battlefield." Teacher? The Radiance Pagoda Master was startled. Longshaw said indifferently, "Are you going to say it or not?" The Radiance Pagoda Master had to say, "Since teacher wants to take a look, this student will certainly satisfy your request. How about this? After returning to the association, I will activate a direct transmission to you. We have sealed the battlefield and also established a direct transmission spell." Longshaw nodded and stood up expressionlessly. "Oh, then let's go." Peter Chan impatiently walked around in the office, sweating profusely. He felt that there was something that he could not hide. Master Chiu and his girlfriend went out yesterday morning, but now it was already noon of the next day, and they had not returned yet. Peter Chan did not even have any way to contact them. He had already fooled Miss Sakura on the satellite phone yesterday. He felt that if he fooled her again today, he would not be able to keep his job. Back. Manager. That young master is back. It's downstairs." The subordinate rushed in at this time. Normally, Chun Bide would have scolded the other party for being rude and not knocking at the door. But this time, he sat down and let out a long sigh. "Oh my God, she's finally back, this little ancestor. Mobile phone, MOM. No advertisement, Xion 81, Sheen Zinc Sinkson, Sheen.